Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
It's 6:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. We're just about 3 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. Stocks are higher to close out a trading week that's been gripped by a deadly virus in China. The country is taking steps to stop the outbreak and is now restricting travel for 40 million people. We get more from Bloomberg's Selena Wang in Beijing.
Cases are now emerging in 32 of China's 34 provinces. One patient as young as 10 years old. And of course, this has spread all across Asia with cases in Singapore, Vietnam, Japan, South Korea. Even though they are instituting this nationwide screening, some infected patients aren't even showing a fever, which shows that the screening and catching of this pathogen is going to be harder than was initially expected.
The virus is blamed for at least 25 deaths, even as the World Health Organization stopped short of calling it a global health emergency.
On the economic front, euro area growth remains sluggish to start the year, despite signs of a pickup in Germany. A composite purchasing managers index for the region held at 50.9 in January, coming in below estimates. France was a drag on the reading as labor strikes hit the services sector.
Here in the U.S., we get PMI data for January at 9:45 a.m. Wall Street time. Economists forecast an unchanged composite reading of 52.7.
Shares of Intel are up almost 6.5% in early trading. The chipmaker reported earnings that topped estimates and gave a bullish forecast for the year. Here with more is Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
The quarter suggests personal computer demand remains strong and purchasing by data center owners has come surging back. Intel said sales in 2020 will be about $73.5 billion. Analysts were looking for $72.2 billion on average. Fourth quarter revenue also beat the highest Wall Street estimates. Results are being lifted by strong growth in data center chips and steady demand for PCs. Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Charlie, thank you. And coming up today, we get earnings from just 4 companies in the S&P 500, with American Express headlining that list. Futures this morning are higher. S&P futures up 7 points. Dow futures up 67. NASDAQ futures up about 30. The DAX in Germany's up 1 1/3%. 10-year Treasury down 2/32, yield 1.74%. And the yield on the 2-year at 1.52%. NYMEX crude oil is falling down 0.6% or 31 cents at $55.28 a barrel. And COMEX gold is down 0.4% or $6.90 at $15.64.70 an ounce. The euro is at 1.1032 against the dollar. British pound 1.3083, and the yen at 109.61. And straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news, and this is Bloomberg.
All right, thanks, Karen. It's 6:33 on Wall Street, and this news update is brought to you by Land Rover. Life's an adventure. Experience it in the new Land Rover Discovery Sport. Visit your tri-state area Land Rover retailer for details on the new Discovery Sport. Land Rover, above and beyond. Now here's Michael Barr.
Thank you, Nathan. Democratic House prosecutors have made their argument at President Trump's impeachment trial that he abused power like no other president in history. The Democrats say Trump demanded that Ukraine investigate his rival Joe Biden, while he withheld crucial military aid as leverage. Lead prosecutor Adam Schiff told senators in a late-night speech, right matters.
No one is really making the argument Donald Trump would never do such a thing. Because of course we know that he would, and of course we know that he did.
Democratic Senator Mazie Hirono of Hawaii.
I think that this is what a bully does, and President Trump exhibits all of the manifestations of a bully.
Also, while during a break, Republican Senator Joni Ernst of Iowa criticized the Obama administration for denying aid to Ukraine.
These House managers did nothing of the sort to provide that assistance to Ukraine, and yet now they are on their high horse about President Trump not doing enough for Ukraine.
Trump's defense team is waiting its turn, which will begin on Saturday. Alan Dershowitz, a member of Donald Trump's legal team and Harvard law professor emeritus, spoke with Bloomberg's June Grasso about the Democrats' impeachment case against the president.
Is there any president who couldn't be impeached if the House of Representatives had a majority of the other party than the president. I think it's a very dangerous precedent to set to allow a president to be impeached on abuse of power. I'm going to present a list of presidents who have been accused of abusing their power when I speak on Monday.
Today, the Democrats will press their final day of arguments. A new national poll shows Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders running neck and neck among the Democratic presidential candidates. The 7 News Emerson College poll shows the former vice president with 30% support, followed closely by the Vermont senator at 27%. Wildfires burning across Australia probably will push the increase in global carbon dioxide emissions past their record this year. The Met Office, which is Britain's official forecaster, said the fires may have an influence on weather patterns. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. Coming up to 6:36 on Wall Street, time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Here's John Stashauer.
Nathan, out with the old, in with the new at the Australian Open. 38-year-old Serena Williams ousted in the third round, her earliest departure down under since 2006. She had 56 unforced errors. She lost to Wang Qiang of China less than 5 months ago. The two played at the U.S. Open, and Serena won 6-1, 6-love. This time, Qiang won 7-5 in the third. So she moves on, as does the still only 15-year-old Coco Gauff. What she did last year at Wimbledon, obviously no fluke. Gauff took out the Aussie Open defending champ Naomi Osaka straight sets. Roger Federer is tied 1-set-all right now with John Millman. Golf, Torrey Pines, one of Tiger Woods' favorite courses. He shot 69 his first round of 2020.
Oh, I definitely was feeling it. I missed the competition, the competing, and trying to keep everything as calm as I possibly could. I didn't do a very good job of that starting out. I made a quick bogey there early, and I felt like I fought back, and a lot of positives hit in the South course.
Tiger 3 shots off the lead. In Brooklyn, LeBron James led the Lakers over the struggling Nets, 128-113, 27 points, a triple-double, and with just 15 more points, LeBron moves into third place on the NBA's all-time scoring list, passing Kobe Bryant. He would then trail only Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Karl Malone. The Nets have lost 5 straight, 10 of the last 12. The contract finalized. The Mets will introduce their new manager, Luis Rojas, today. That presser will come just after the one where the Giants say goodbye and thanks for the memories to Eli Manning. With the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashauer. Nathan?
All right, John, thank you. It is 6:37 on Wall Street.
The following commentary is from Bloomberg Opinion.
Deadly viruses aren't pharma's top priority. Why not? I'm Max Neeson, a columnist for Bloomberg Opinion. Drug makers have made significant advances in recent years. Unfortunately, their ability to combat potential pandemics isn't included. Big Pharma is increasingly focused on expensive medicines for conditions like cancer. Those efforts can come at the expense of less lucrative work in the service of public health. A deadly outbreak in China has reminded the world of the threat of new diseases. It's past time to make sure that the world has the medical firepower that it will need. Only 4 of the world's biggest drug makers have major vaccine units. While a virus is behind the latest outbreak, drug-resistant bacteria are a serious long-term threat, and few companies are developing antibiotics. Public efforts fill some gaps, but can't do it all in current budgets. Getting medicines to the finish line requires private company expertise that's becoming less widespread. Blockbuster drug sales motivate Big Pharma, and little else moves the needle for them. Revenue potential for infectious disease drugs is inherently limited, alongside more funds for public efforts and basic research. This virus may not be the big epidemic we fear, but we need to build a system that's up to the challenge when one emerges. I'm Max Neeson. For more opinion, please go to Bloomberg.com/opinion or OPIN Go on the Bloomberg terminal.
This has been Bloomberg Opinion.
You can hear Bloomberg Opinion commentaries every weekday at this time. Terminal customers can read more at OPIN Go. It is 6:38 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg Small Business Report. Here's John Tucker.
If you manage a distillery, a cemetery, or dozens of other types of small businesses, you may be exempt from OSHA safety inspections this year. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration released its updated list of industry groups exempt from most types of OSHA safety inspections if the employer has 10 or fewer workers. Businesses with 11 or more workers don't qualify. The list is expected to remain in effect until another directive is issued in about a year. In addition to distilleries and cemeteries, other newly added industry groups include siding construction contractors, coffee and tea manufacturers, grease manufacturers, paint makers, furniture wholesalers, bakeries, taxi companies, and dentist offices. OSHA issues the list annually to comply with federal law exempting small businesses in safer than average industries. And that's the Bloomberg Small Business Report.
All right, John, thank you. Coming up this morning, we get earnings from American Express. Let's get a preview now from Bloomberg's Larry Kofsky.
An increase in card spending, which drives about half of Amex revenue, could mean spending growth will exceed expectations of 6%, according to Bloomberg Intelligence. Analysts surveyed by Bloomberg are forecasting a profit of $2.01 per share on revenue of over $11.3 billion. Corporate card spending may have rebounded late in the year as trade tensions eased and holiday sales exceeded expectations, especially for high-end consumers. Although its card loan loss rate is rising, it remains the lowest among its peers. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Larry, and Jamie Dimon is being rewarded for another record profit for J.P. Morgan Chase. The CEO is getting more than $31 million in compensation for 2019. $25 million of that comes in restricted stock tied to performance. S&P futures higher by 7.5 points. Dow futures up 71. NASDAQ futures a gain of 31.5. This is Bloomberg.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luck.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Wendy Sanchez, live from Spain with Henry the Coconut. Henry, what are your thoughts on First Choice doing holidays for under $299 each? Henry the Coconut, could you comment, please? Look, Henry, we shaved your bristles and drew you a face. The least you could do is chat to us about First Choice holidays under $299 each. Say something!
Ridiculous deals need ridiculous adverts. First Choice. Ridiculously good value.
Offers per person and subject to limited availability. At all protected.
Here at Tesco, we're celebrating over 100 years of great value with even more great prices that take you back. Like a 12-pack of Bird's Eye chicken dippers, now half price, from £2 to just £1. All this week at Tesco.
Selected larger stores subject to availability. Offer ends 27th of January.
Peoples of London. Cooking for family and friends is a real hassle, Sergey tells me. So I, Alexander, occasionally take care of marvelous dinner for whole family. Which means we all go out for meerkat meals. Exactly. How did you guess? Get 2 for 1 on food for up to 6 people at your local favorites, like Grill Shack with meerkat meals, when you buy through Compare the Market. Qualifying purchase, app only, 2 for 1 on selected food, participating restaurants, a la carte only, Sunday to Thursday, T's and C's and exclusions apply.
At Ring, we've reinvented the doorbell.
So no matter where you are or what time of day, you can watch over your home and the things you care about. Ring Video Doorbell streams HD video and two-way talk straight to your phone, so you can speak to whoever's at your door from anywhere.
Delivery.
Oh, great. Could you leave it with my neighbour, please?
Sure, no problem.
And it's so simple, you can install it yourself in minutes. See, hear and speak to whoever's at your door from wherever you are with Ring Video Doorbell. Available at ring.com and selected retailers.
Network of news and financial information 24 hours a day. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
On the eve of the Lunar New Year, China's biggest week-long holiday, transportation is now shut down in at least 10 cities with a total of about 33 million people. Even parts of the Great Wall are closed, 23 deaths confirmed. Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte has renewed a threat to terminate the deal allowing American forces to train in his country unless the U.S. restores the visa of one of his political allies who has been linked to human rights violations. In Houston, a massive explosion seemed to level a building this morning. Social media reporting people feeling the blast all over the area. Victor lives nearby.
But when it came out here, we saw all this debris. The building over here is damaged, and on that side is damaged, and like you said, on this building here. I think they're more like I think they're a valve plant. I'm not sure what they are.
Recent video shows some flames still flickering in the debris. Stock futures are moderately higher ahead of the opening bell on Wall Street. I'm Michael Toscano.
Why all the top-tier experts? Because business is not a magic trick.
Give us a sense of the economic backdrop.
Bloomberg Markets.
Which financial records are these?
Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. This update brought to you by Portfolio Analyst, powered by Interactive Brokers. Savvy investors use Portfolio Analyst to create a consolidated view of their finances and check the health of their complete financial portfolio. Sign up for free at portfolioanalyst.com. Futures higher this morning. We go to the First Word breaking news desk for today's morning call. Here's Bill Maloney. Bill, good morning.
And good morning, Karen. That's right. U.S. futures are climbing right now. With Dow futures up 70 points. S&P's gained 7 and NASDAQ futures rise by 30. The U.S. 10-year yield at 1.74%. Gold is trading lower by 4. And Shanghai was closed overnight for the Lunar New Year, while European markets are posting at least 1% gains this morning. Back in the U.S. on the economic front at 9:45, market U.S. manufacturing and services PMIs. After the bell last night, Intel boosted its forecast. Shares are up 6% in the pre-market. And regarding earnings this morning, look for American Express to report around 7:30. In deal news, Qorvo and Skyworks are said to be weighing bids for Broadcom's wireless chip business, which may fetch $10 billion. And wrapping things up, Google's price target raised to $17.69 over at KeyBank. Live from the First Breaking News Desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Karen?
All right, Bill, thank you. And to hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg, type squawk on your terminal, SQUAWK. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, the gender gap in President Donald Trump's approval rating is a wide 19 percentage points in a new poll. A 7 News Emerson College poll of registered voters nationwide found 57% of men approved of the job that President Trump is doing, while only 38% of women approved. It comes as the impeachment trial against the president continues today. China has moved to lock down at least 3 big cities in an unprecedented effort to contain the deadly new virus that has sickened hundreds of people and spread to other parts of the world. China's National Health Commission confirmed 830 cases of coronavirus, with 25 deaths, including an 80-year-old man who died after returning from a stay in Wuhan, the epicenter of the outbreak. In the NBA, the Nets lost, the Wizards won. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, thanks, Michael. We are live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studios. We're at 6:49 on Wall Street. Time now to check what's going on in D.C. Some of the top stories in the nation's capital include President Trump promising a Middle East peace plan before he hosts Israeli leaders at the White House on Tuesday. President today addressing the anti-abortion rights March for Life in person. That'll be a first for the annual event. And Joe Biden running neck and neck with Bernie Sanders in the latest national poll. Also making news, of course, one more day of arguments for House managers in President Trump's Senate impeachment trial. Joining us now, Brown University Political Science Chair Wendy Schiller. Of course, the House Democrats have had all week to tell their side. What do you make of the arguments that they've laid out for Senate jurors this week, Wendy?
Well, they've been pretty straightforward in the argument, right? I mean, it's basically abuse of power, abuse of power, abuse of power. So they've stayed away from terms like, crime or broken the law, per se. That's not what the Constitution says about impeachment. Basically, the House can decide what, crimes and misdemeanors are, and abuse of power is generally considered to be one of the foremost things the framers were worried about. So I think they've stuck to message. I think they've been smart about that, because anything that comes out of this has to be easily digestible for most voters, and that's an easily digestible concept, abuse of power. And this sort of image of the president on the phone sort of bullying and trying to extort a government is pretty cemented, I think, now from their procedure. Whether that's persuasive to remove him from office is a whole other ballgame, but I think it's been a pretty disciplined exercise by the Democrats so far.
Well, that raises the question of whether this is about removing the president from office by the Senate or voters removing the president from office in the election in November. Do you get a sense of how this argument might be resonating with voters as they think about that decision in just a few months?
Yeah, I think the Democrats are making the case that he's unfit for office. He's abused the power, and if you put him back in, he'll continue to abuse the power. And the other side, Republicans are saying he's president of the United States. He was conducting foreign policy. It's within his purview. So if you like him as president for other reasons, you have to live with this, because this is what presidents do. This is how powerful presidents are. And that's the argument they'll make. And whether that resonates with enough of these key voters in a small handful of states, 6 or 7 states, that's a big question mark. The other risk now that the Republicans will put their case up is, if the president's lawyers go too far rhetorically, then the people who are running against the vulnerable senators in some of these states, like Colorado, Arizona, North Carolina, and Maine, among others, they're going to use that in a campaign against those senators. So it's a little tighter it's trickier for the Senate, particularly now with the Republicans. You want to rile up the Trump base and defend him vigorously, but if you go too far rhetorically, that's just fodder for some of these pretty strong challengers the Democrats are putting up against these senators.
Well, of course, a lot of the talk has been about whether Susan Collins, the Republican from Maine, is vulnerable. Also plenty of discussion about Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. What other vulnerable senators are you looking at as we come to the possibility of a shift in power in the Senate in 2020?
Yeah, Cory Gardner from Colorado, I think is, I think he's got a 36 or 37% approval rating. I think Tom Tillis has lower than 40% approval rating in North Carolina. North Carolina is a weird state. It can shift. It's a Democratic governor and a slight majority Republican legislature right now. But, if there's a big enough turnout among Democrats, that can flip that seat. Martha McSally, I think she lost the last election barely and then was put into office by a Republican governor to replace John McCain. So now McSally may face Mark Kelly, astronaut versus, Air Force pilot. So I think or military woman, I think these are tough seats to defend for the Republicans. And when you're looking at the kinds of money that some of these challengers are already raising, on the Democratic side, there are going to be formal races, and this will contribute to it. And will voters decide Trump could win, that he may win, and then they decide they want a stopgap against him? So you could see split ticket voting higher in 2020 than you did before, because now people have had a chance to see Trump. Oh, he's going to get elected. Let's make sure that there's a backstop against him. And that's another thing that would be a headwind against some of these Republican senators keeping their seats.
The House managers have been trying to make the case for calling witnesses in this trial. What's the political risk if witnesses are allowed in the impeachment trial and it drags on for another couple of weeks?
Nathan, I think there's an Achilles heel for the Democrats here. I don't know if Hunter Biden did anything wrong. I don't know if there was a conflict of interest. I have no idea about that. I'd like to know more about that. So the problem is, if you push on witnesses and you push hard on witnesses, then the country says, well, wait a minute, why don't we hear about Hunter Biden, what he did in the gas company board? Like, was there something to investigate? And then you really drag it in. I don't think Joe Biden has to come in, but I think it's a real Achilles heel for their argument and a risk for them that they don't want to take. So they're saying it because they know the Republicans won't call the witnesses, I think, and they'll claim executive privilege on the president's team. But it's also a risk for the Democrats, because then voters can say, why can't we hear from these other players? Why can't we hear they say under oath that there was nothing to investigate? And I think it opens up a much bigger issue for them going into 2020.
And if you have the possibility of witnesses like Hunter Biden coming in, I mean, what does that mean for implications for the 2020 primary race with Joe Biden running, potentially against Bernie Sanders? I mean, that's the way things seem to be looking out or shaking out in the latest polling.
Well, one of Hillary Clinton's weaknesses, and there were several in the primaries that led her to be vulnerable to Bernie, but then also to Trump, was that people didn't want more investigations. They felt the Clintons had sort of brought with them an administration of investigations, and people thought, no more investigations. We're tired of it. We don't want all this. And I think that could filter into the Democratic primary process against Biden among some voters who are torn, saying, wait a minute, Bernie's Bernie, but we think we know everything about Bernie. But now there's this new thing about Biden. Will that compromise him against Trump? Will he just do a lock him up all over again? And will that render Biden more vulnerable than Bernie? And I think that's real. And I think that is the real risk, not only for Biden, but also for the Democrats, if this gets really drawn out in terms of the nomination contest.
I want to ask you in our last minute or so here about the arguments we're expecting today on the House manager's side, the focus on obstruction of justice, that article of impeachment. What are you going to be looking for?
Well, I think that's a real signal sending to voters over the age of 60 who vote in some of the highest turnout levels, right? We're looking at 65 to 72% of those voters vote in 2020 in presidential elections. So that's basically bringing up Nixon. That's just saying to that group of voters, and they slide a little bit towards Republicans as a whole, but generally, look, do you want Nixon again? We didn't stop him the first time. This is Nixon-like. And it won't resonate, I don't think, with anybody under 60 who doesn't really remember that whole Watergate trauma for the country. But it's another political move for the Democrats in terms of positioning themselves for 2020.
Great. Always great getting your insights, Wendy, as this impeachment trial continues in the Senate. Thanks so much for being with us this morning. That's Wendy Schiller, Brown University's political science chair, joining us this morning ahead of the third day of House manager arguments in the impeachment trial. Of course, we will have full coverage and analysis throughout the day and as the trial continues here on Bloomberg Radio. Karen?
All right, Nathan, thank you. S&P futures, they are higher this morning, up 8 points. Dow futures up 76 and NASDAQ futures up 34. The DAX in Germany also jumping up 1.4%, while the CAC in Paris is up 1.1%, and the FTSE 100 is up 1.6%. 10-year Treasury down 3/32, yield 1.74%, and the yield on the 2-year 1.52%. And NYMEX crude oil is down 0.4% or 23 cents at $55.37 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 0.5% or $7.10 at $15.6450 an ounce. And Bloomberg surveillance live in Davos with Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrow. That's straight ahead. For Nathan Hager, I'm Karen Moscow, and this is Bloomberg.
Influential conversation.
Let's get this right, sir. You didn't see 3 men dressed as clowns take off in a van with a Renaissance painting because you were distracted by, and I quote, a sporty red compact SUV with a bold mesh grille, a sculpted bonnet with sweeping roofline on diamond-cut alloys.
And beautiful rear haunches.
So, you saw a Jaguar E-Pace. But what about the clowns?
What clowns?
Jaguar E-Pace, designed to steal attention. Search Jaguar E-Pace.
At the Bank of Santander, they've created Stan, a smart bot that can predict the future of remortgaging.
I'll read Stan. Will my mortgage rate go up?
1955 was the last time Newcastle won the cup.
No, try not to mumble.
Playing, let's get ready to rumble.
Oh. Meanwhile, at Santander, they can't predict your future, but they'll help secure it with great mortgage rates fixed for up to 10 years. See what's possible at Santander.
Early repayment charges apply. Lending subject to status and criteria. Your home may be repossessed if you do not keep up repayments on your mortgage.
Hello, I'm your captain for today's Virgin Atlantic flight. Please drop everything and pay close attention to the following announcement. The sale is now on. Our crew are ready to take your bags and stresses away. The cocktails are ready to serve, the movies are loaded, and we're all set for takeoff to the Caribbean. So, take your seat in our award-winning economy class. We're ready to go when you are.
The Virgin Atlantic sale. Fly amazing for less. For more details, visit virginatlantic.com.
Which segments of Alphabet's business are most likely to come under scrutiny?
Get all the pieces.
They're getting mixed signals from governments.
He's failed to gain traction.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Davos, Switzerland, for our audience worldwide, good afternoon, good afternoon. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on the final day of the World Economic Forum, live on Bloomberg TV and on Bloomberg Radio, alongside Tom Keene. I'm Jonathan Ferro, almost there, Tom, and I've got to say, the hallways of this event at the moment, very, very quiet.
Yeah, it's a real shift here from 15 years ago. It used to be a full-day seminar, and with so many other conferences around the world, with the jets, with the travel plans, with the pressures of global corporate activity, people are here for 2. They're here for 3 days. They slip in. Lagarde slipping in after that important ECB meeting.
For President Lagarde.
Yeah, slipping in yesterday as well. What's different here, of course, so much with a Friday wrap up to the week is you really begin to take some of these themes and move them into February. And, of course, the Fed meeting January 29th as well.
Looking forward to that, and looking forward to our coverage in the next couple of hours as well. In just a moment, we'll be catching up with Stephen Paliuca, Bain Capital CEO. Don't miss that. We'll catch up with the Syngenta Chief Executive Officer as well. A couple of professors you might want to hear from, Eric Brynjolfsson of MIT and Robert Schiller of Yale University as well. That is all coming up on the program. Looking forward to many of these interviews, including later, Tom, the Deputy Prime Minister of Canada too.
An important conversation with Chrystia Freeland. I do want to say that this is a perfect time to talk to the Nobel laureate Robert Schiller, because he is expert in his exuberance on that phrase that's captured everything you and I have worked on this week, which is the boometh and the busteth, and Schiller owns the high ground on
Let's
that.
get to the price action of the moment, shall we? 2 hours and 30 minutes away from the opening bell in New York City. On the week, the equity market doing a whole lot of nothing. Over in China, that's where the big moves have been. The Shanghai Comp down by around about 3 percentage points and change, several percentage points lower on the week. That's where the worry has been around the coronavirus. Interesting, not much follow through into the US equity market. The story in the bond market, yields up a single basis point, 174. It's been a big story through the week, a strong bid into treasuries. Elsewhere in foreign exchange, euro dollar 110.33. We're down 0.2%. All attention on the ECB in the last 24 hours as they begin their one-year review of monetary policy. A lot to discuss. Are they on autopilot? That was the takeaway of many people just yesterday. President Christine Lagarde pushing back against that quite firmly.
To those who think that it's autopilot, I think that's ridiculous. There is a forward guidance which is strong, which is setting, a very clear timetable that is fact dependent. But let's look at the facts. Let's look at how the economy evolves. That's what we do. We need to be fact driven. We need to be clear in our communication, and we will be. And I'm saying today, don't assume that it will be on autopilot.
Yesterday you talked quite extensively about negative rates. You said tiering is working well, but is there a point where actually the side effects of negative rates means that you need to scale it back?
We will be looking at the side effects as part of the strategy review. There's no question about that. We need to be attentive to that. Financial stability is not our first driver of concern and consideration, but we will have to look at it, of course.
No one is managing the message here in a short visit than Christine Lagarde. This has been extraordinary, folks, and it's also original. And, John, I would suggest what she's going through at the ECB is completely foreign to our American listeners and viewers. We need to stop and explain what is Christine Lagarde doing.
Got to redefine the inflation target of the European Central Bank. We haven't had a review there since 2003. At the moment, they interpret their mandate, which is
come on, inflation's prices go up. Prices go up, that's inflation.
The target is inflation close to but below 2%.
Okay, 2% is the level. Olivier Blanchard at the IMF with Lagarde at the time said, let's goose it, let's go to 4%. Charles Evans of Chicago, somewhat alluding to that same idea. Are they moving the goalposts? Is that what this is? Goalpost is American football?
I understand.
You move the goalpost, you move the kicker back, 49ers. Okay, you move the goalpost. Is Madame Lagarde trying to move the goalpost that Mario Draghi put in the ground?
I don't think she has a predetermined outcome just yet. I think this is a conversation. I think she's been pretty clear about pretty much everything over the last 24 hours. That the one-year review will start without a predetermined outcome. And there's a whole range of possibilities of what could happen with that inflation target. It could be something boring, just 2%. It could be a range. It could be anything, Tom.
And the unspoken here, folks, in Davos, and this really goes, we're going back to New York. John, again, did you get the golf stream? Francine has a golf stream.
Is that right?
This time. We're going back slow motion. Fine, we'll be there Monday. And you pick up the theme, can you really reflate? Reflate, folks, is undefined in economics. We know inflation, we know deflation, we know disinflation, a lesser inflation. What is reflation? And if that's a goal, how do you get there? No one in this valley knows.
This is the big point. Can they achieve it? Even if they adapt the inflation target, can
or
they
wish
get there?
for it or
how
hope
do they
for
get
it?
there? And then what happens elsewhere? A big conversation through the week here in Davos, Switzerland, has been the United States against Europe over one issue, trade.
Started early.
Big focus. It felt like there was a softening of stances on the US side, but as the week progresses, things really start to firm up. We caught up with several heads of states here in Davos, Switzerland, including the Prime Ministers of the Netherlands and Greece, and both sounded somewhat optimistic on a US-EU trade deal. Take a listen.
I was happy to hear the comments made by the U.S. president here in Davos that he is looking to have a quick negotiation with Europe to conclude a trade deal as soon as possible.
One of the consistently successful things we are dealing with as a European Union is trade. So I'm optimistic about it because we know what is important for Trump, we know what is important for Europe, and we are both pragmatic.
I don't know if it's going to be weeks or months, but I think that the ingredients are here for a deal that's going to be a win-win.
Two very different messages from two very different nations, and of course they adapt and adjust to that gentleness that Mr. Farrow observed, and then the abruptness of what we heard from the President of the United States. We had two messages from America. Which one do you think's front and center?
I think at the moment quite a pragmatic response from the Europeans, but quite clearly a firm approach from the United States about what needs to happen in the coming months to secure trade.
And the illusion, John, is okay, we're done with China, phase 2 and all that. We're done with China, now we have to look to Europe, across the Atlantic.
We're on to Europe, and this is what the US Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross had to say right here in Davos, Switzerland.
We went through a whole process with the 232 investigation of autos. President has digested that. We have a perfect justification to put tariffs on if we wish to. President had decided it was better to negotiate. We've had very constructive negotiations with the German car manufacturers, with the Korean, and with the Japanese. So far we haven't felt a need to do it. But if people do silly things, if they do protectionist and discriminatory things like the Pillar 1 of the digital service tax, we obviously are going to respond.
Well, let's talk about the Section 232 investigation. Self-imposed deadline the middle of November. From what you've just said, from what I'm hearing, is that the outcome of that investigation was that it is a national security risk at the moment. Is that true?
The president so announced, yes.
Where's the follow-through? Because the middle of November is when we expected to see the follow-through. And now people look at the self-imposed deadline and say, well, it's expired. The administration can't use Section 232 anymore because that deadline has expired.
Well, they simply don't understand Section 232.
Walk us through it.
What was needed in November was for the president to decide on a path forward. He did. He decided the path forward was to negotiate as long as that was bearing fruit, rather than just immediately put in something else.
But your interpretation of the legal issues is that Section 232 in that investigation still applies.
Absolutely.
Even though the self-imposed deadline has come and gone. This
is an imaginary deadline. The deadline was that he would take a decision. He took a decision. Period.
Well, let's talk about what could happen and what would need to happen to stop those auto tariffs from going on. As things stand currently, the tariff for cars coming out of the United States into Europe is 10%, as you know, and the tariff for autos coming out of Europe into the United States, I believe, is 2.5%. There are some big truck tariffs there, some SUV tariffs for the United States that really skew a lot of this. What would you like to see from the Europeans in the coming months to put things to one side and move on?
Well, first of all, this digital service thing clearly is meant to be discriminatory. There are very few companies in the whole world other than the American companies that fit that definition. So the clear intent was to be discriminatory. We have other laws that also enable us to retaliate against discriminatory behavior. If there is discriminatory behavior, we will fight back. Forget anything else.
Is that a red line? If the French go through with this, they've delayed it, but if they go through with it, is that a red line for this administration?
Well, that's up to the president to decide at the time. It depends what else is going on. But it is clear that this is a protectionist and discriminatory proposal that was made.
Interesting part of our interview with the US Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross on trade and the relationship between the United States, Tom, and the EU.
Very much so. What's great about Davos is there can be breaking news. There can be things that come out of here. They seem like small things, but usually they are of a cultural fabric. In the fixed income market, it's every nation for itself and how long that paper should be. The short-term paper, mid-term, the long-term paper. And we've got some serious breaking news on something that's a third rail for so many in America. What should be the length of our bonds? The Secretary of Treasury speaking with our Saleha motion, and she joins us right now. It's a small matter, but to so many people it's important. Let's begin with what did the Secretary say?
The Treasury Secretary commented on the 20-year note that he will be issuing in the first half of 2020, and I asked him, will this affect the weighted average maturity for U.S. government bonds, and he expects it to extend slightly, not massively, slightly.
In my youth, you two wouldn't understand this. It was a 30-year bond. We moved that to the 10-year. Yes, thank you. The 10-year benchmark. But John nails it. Doesn't know he nails it. In the 20s, the solution was long-term paper. France with a 50-year. Perpetuity bonds of John's grandfather in England as well. Or the Austrian piece that we recently saw of, 100 years old? Why is America so sensitive about the duration of this paper when other countries do 50-year routinely?
Well, we have the highest budget deficit, and it's the world's largest economy. Our treasuries here are considered, in the U.S., are considered the deepest, most liquid assets in the world.
So it's above us. We don't have to do it, right? The 50-year bond, John, is beneath.
Well, no, not quite. Mnuchin did say that the 50-year and 100-year bond is the study on that at Treasury is continuing. Yeah. It's not going to happen in the near term.
It's been continuing since Abraham Lincoln.
No,
well, just differences in the market. We have a much shorter maturity in, say, the United States Treasury market compared to, say, the UK, where there's massive pension demand for the longer duration securities. I think what Saleha's reporting on is really, really important.
Yes.
Because when we got the news on this last week, the big discussion in the bond market was, okay, you're issuing a 20-year. Do you cannibalize some of the supply from the 30-year, or are you taking it from the front? And it looks like, to your reporting, that we're just going to extend the average duration a little bit. Is this the start of a process that we take one step, we extend the average maturity slightly with a 20, and then we go again with a 50? How should we be thinking about this story at the moment?
I mean, it does appear as if the Treasury Department under Mnuchin is going a very deliberative mode and going carefully. He said that the 20-year is easier to do from a technology standpoint. It fits right into what's out there in the market, and they want to see how this plays out before they do the 50 and the 100-year. Make a decision.
Is the why the catalyst here trillion-dollar budgets?
The catalyst is how to take advantage of the low cost of borrowing, how to secure...
so why not just do 50-year paper? We look wonderful. I mean...
I did ask the Treasury Secretary about that. I think they want to go one step at a time. He said there's a lot of technological issues when it comes to issuing ultra-longs. They've never done those before. The 20-year we had back in 1986 and before then.
Way back.
Any word on cutting the budget deficit, Saleha? Is that part of the conversation?
Not today.
Going into campaign.
Stay in Davos.
But when you ask the Trump administration, the deficit is the fault and problem of Congress. When you ask Congress, they say it's the executive
branch. Surveillance break slew for here. Saleha, thank you so much. Truly
great reporting.
News making here in Davos, and again on that slight extending of the duration of U.S. paper. More from Secretary Mnuchin. No doubt about it. Coming up, this is important. We'll speak to the gentleman of the parquet floor. This is Mr. Pagliucci of Bain Capital. Lots to talk to Steve Pagliuca about. So much of that has to do with the NBA. This is Bloomberg. Good morning.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Welcome to Nuffield Health Battersea, a gym built around you. You get regular health MOTs to create a plan that works for you, with physios and personal trainers on site. You'll find a wide range of equipment and classes, and our expert team will support you to get the most out of your health, fitness, and your membership. Join today to get the rest of the month free. Search Nuffield Health. Specialists in you. 12-month commitments only. Facilities stated are in most gyms. Visit nuffieldhealth.com/terms.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, keep me out the cold jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, East London jobs, West London jobs, extra hour in bed jobs, startup jobs, late start jobs, get home in the daylight jobs, banking jobs, building jobs, flexible working on a Friday jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
This is not a cat. This is not a rocket. And this is not a sale. That's right. At Smarty Mobile, we're not having a sale. While others are slashing prices, we're introducing our best ever new plans. Take our new 30-gig data SIM for just £10 a month. With unlimited calls and texts and no speed restrictions, credit checks or contract tying you down, why shop around? New plans, great value. Now that's Smarty. Grab yours today. Search Smarty Mobile. See smarty.co.uk for terms.
Booms and busts again at some point, although I don't see one anytime soon. I see and I hear what I'd call kind of a confident, middle-of-the-road view of the current economic environment. U.S. economy is in good shape. Europe, a little bit better. Headwinds of the Phase 1 deal helps a little. But in the distribution of outcomes, overwhelming likely scenario is economy chugs along.
It keeps chugging along. David Solomon of Goldman Sachs with Tom Keane and me just in the last 24 hours. This is Bloomberg Surveillance live from the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. The economy chugging along, Tom. Is that the thing?
Well, that's a really important point because this has really not been discussed that much. On Bloomberg Radio and Bloomberg Television, we say nobody really knows what chugging along means. Is it 2 point something? Is it not? Anne Helguria was really eloquent off the microphone about the differential between the IMF view and the grimmer OECD
not sure if we share
view.
The views off the mic.
No, but this is published. It's published news that IMF is more optimistic right now than OECD. And all our good guests on Bloomberg Surveillance, we go back home with a variance of opinion.
Well, the guest coverage continues with Steve Paliuka, Bain Capital CEO. Stephen, great to have you with us.
Hey, great to be here.
Fantastic to have you with us in the studio on our final day here. Let's talk about that. How's the economy? You've got a series of businesses through the US economy at the moment, worldwide for that matter as well. What do you see?
You know, I agree with Solomon. It's kind of chugging along. Our businesses are doing well.
record low unemployment in the U.S. We've had kind of an oil dividend for 6 or 7 years now. Oil is very cheap, energy is very cheap, and so planes are full. Restaurants are full, and things are going pretty well.
What's the scale meter right now for Bain Capital? Everybody's out there. We got to scale this, scale that. Define scale and what it means for you.
Well, we really try to just do the best transactions available. We don't want to be the biggest. We want to be the best. We have about $105 billion of assets today. We think that brings us an advantage because we're a global firm. We actually stem from a consulting firm. We weren't really financial people. And the belief was back in 1984, started with Bill Bain and Mitt Romney, in that we could take the consulting skills and really transform business.
Right. This is a really important point. I'm going to state this, and you tell me if I'm wrong. You're not slaves to internal rate of return. You're looking at it from a different view. Explain that.
Well, we try to take a long-term perspective, and the beauty of the model, and why the model, I think, generally has grown so fast, is that we don't have to have quarterly earnings. We can invest in new products, invest in new software, don't have that kind of pressure. So private equity has grown from, 10 or 12 companies back when I started to 4,000 companies, and is a very significant factor in the economy right now. And has a real place in the economy because the business model is working, of kind of owner-operators working in concert with management to build great companies. That's the bottom line.
Well, let's talk about the business model, because it often comes under fire from a lot of people, as you know quite well, Steve. I'm just wondering how it is sustainable at the moment, given that there's so much more money in your industry compared to, say, where we were 20, 30 years ago.
Well, it's really interesting. I did an interview in 1989 where that was the exact same statement.
Same question.
And then I did one in 99. It was the same statement. And 2009.
Where do you think Farrell got it from?
Good learner. And it's a legitimate question. But what's happened in the industry is in 89, it was mainly USA. And then it expanded in the 90s into global. And then it expanded into technology and medicine and other products. And so the ability to kind of put money to work and be global has expanded the industry. So I actually think there's a lot of money out there, but the returns of private equity are still world-class because the model has worked.
Let's talk projects. Patient capital, getting together public-private. In Italy, cruise ships, Richard Branson, all sounds very exotic and fancy.
What are you talking about?
This is something you guys are doing right now.
Well, we're really excited. Richard came to us about 4 years ago, my partner Ryan Cotton and I, and said he wanted to start a brand new cruise line. It was going to be different from everyone out there. And we went on that journey with him. It's been a great partnership. And right now, the first boat being built in Italy is going to be delivered to the U.S. and we'll start sailing out of Miami.
And this is in partnership with the Italian government?
Yes, the Italian government is into job creation, and these boats create a lot of jobs, and so they give you a financing package. So our $750 million equity plus a $2.2 billion financing package has increased in
What's going to be the architectural or experiential distinction of this boat versus the other boats that are the stereotype of the industry?
Yeah, these are very unique boats. It's going to be all adult. First of all, the only cruise line that's all adult. And then it has that Richard Branson touch.
Is this like Love Island on the water?
It's going to be amazing.
Steve knows what Love Island is.
I don't know what Love Island. Could you please explain to our radio and television office?
Love Island is.
Love Island
is a reality show. You don't want to go.
I've never heard of Love Island, but we are going to have a kind of a private island experience in Bimini with the cruise. And the boats are designed so there's huge outside spaces, hammocks, restaurants, clubs. It's going to be incredible.
The interview with you, Steve, is always with a shift of basketball at the end, and we talk light about it. But this is really serious, and I'm going to give an example here with some lightness in respect of Mr. Stern. The giant has died in basketball, but it's all of sport. John Farrell's AC Milan is so bad, they've got to go out and spend a lot of money on talent. Mr. Stern invented that with the NBA with Mr. Jordan. Explain what David Stern did to the economics and the aspiration of salary in the sport.
Well, David was a huge visionary, not only in terms of introducing the 50-50 player split and a salary cap, which is fair to everybody, but being way out ahead of the game, going to China 15 years ago, going to Europe, having international offices. At that time, many of the NBA owners were saying, hey, we're spending a lot of money and there's no basketball. His view is basketball would be a world game. It would expand viewership, and that vision became fulfilled. He was unique in that he was a visionary, but also a micromanager. So he was into every detail of the NBA to make sure it was running well, great for fans, and he'll be really missed. It was a sad day at his funeral on Tuesday.
Steve, you're co-owner of the Celtics. your friends are into European football. Mr. Henry over at Liverpool, Mr. Pallotta over at Roma in Italy. How much harder is it to make it in European football, just in terms of how the franchises run compared to, say, something like basketball in America?
Well, they've done a fantastic job over there, and Roma has really contended, hadn't contended before, and John Henry has a fantastic team that they built. The structure is a lot more difficult than the USA sports structure because there really is not any salary controls, and you can get relegated, so somebody can pay a lot of money for a franchise and then be in the minor leagues. So it introduces a new level of risk. So you have to be really on top of those clubs and really manage those tightly so you don't take too many risks.
Should we relegate in American sports to provide a new tension?
I don't think so. The great news right now is in both American football, in basketball, there's incredible parity.
Yeah.
So there's many teams that can win the NBA championship. I hope it's going to be the Celtics, but there are many teams that can win that championship. So there's been competitive tension in these cities, and I think relegation is just a pressure that's not needed.
The Patriots in the Super Bowl, how's it look?
Not very good. Next year.
Can you give us a call on the Super Bowl coming up here in a bit?
I think that the 49ers look good, but Kansas City looks like a very, very strong team.
It's a younger team, and it's more dynamic. I mean, that game is changing with a gentleman from Kansas City, isn't it?
Absolutely. They look pretty devastating to me, and so it should be really fun.
What's the style of basketball that's going to change? They're going to ram the 33-point line out further?
I don't think so. I think the fans like it the way it is now. The big changes in the game have been introducing more mobility and ability to shoot that three, and it's been very exciting.
Steve, that was the sports segment from Davos, Switzerland. It's Stephen Paliuca.
Great to be here on Sports Center.
See the parquet floor here at Davos? It's a parquet floor at Davos.
Coming up on the program, a whole lot more from the World Economic Forum for our audience worldwide on Bloomberg TV and on Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. The NASDAQ starts out at a new record.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
You're listening to the sound of a Halifax customer who used to worry she wasn't saving enough, but is now saving the change every time she runs out of milk. Switch on Save the Change, And when you use your Halifax Visa debit card, we'll round up to the nearest pound and put the difference into your chosen Halifax savings accounts.
You might already know that TuneIn allows you to listen to all the pro sports leagues wherever you go. But did you know TuneIn is also home to the wide world of college sports?
Open three, DeAndre Hunter got it! Handoff Carruthers, big hole right side. He leaps and he surges in, touchdown!
From live college football, basketball, and baseball games to podcasts and coaches shows fueling your love for the game in your school. And the best part is, it's all free. Search college sports to find your team or league.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Good morning, everyone. Bloomberg Surveillance from Davos. We welcome all of you. Bloomberg Radio and Bloomberg Television worldwide. Important meetings, and then always a Friday, a special day to think about the week and really to drive forward to what we return home to. John and I will come to you from New York here on Monday. We say good morning. We do so with somewhat quiet markets. One theme here, John, I know you're going to get to it in the markets, is not so much the move in bonds, but the grind lower. We return to lower yields.
Treasury's big. Yields in and around 170 on a US 10-year through much of this week. A little bit of information from the Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin in the last 30 minutes or so with our Celia Mushkin breaking that story that we'll get a 20-year security. That was last week's news. This week's news today is that we may just extend the average maturity slightly. Will that generate a steeper yield curve? That's a question for the bond market. In the equity market, Treasuries are going nowhere. Equity markets are advancing by 0.2%. We're up 7 points at the S&P 500. Dead flat on the week. Compare that to China, Tom. Wow. The Chinese equity market this week really suffering from what's happening.
Those reports of the morning from Beijing, Selena Wang with us and Tom McKenzie as well. The dynamics getting into their weekend. Let's remember, they're 12 hours ahead. They're into Saturday. You wonder, can they even afford lack of news to Monday morning, or does it keep coming
New Year
to
celebrations, Tom? We're talking about massive cities absolutely shutting down, travel bans, and no real idea when that reopens, those bans get lifted. What does that mean for the economy for the next couple of months?
How's Linda Min with her reporting out of the Singapore airport, where it's tangible in airports throughout the Pacific Rim?
Yeah, a little bit more on that a little bit later. The event of the week for us, the discussion that we've had so far right here in this studio about the boom-bust cycle. It started with Bridgewater's Bob Prince, and then I can tell you pretty much everyone that came and sat next to us wanted to weigh in. Take a listen.
I don't think the cycles are done.
People have been saying that for centuries.
You'd have to kill fear and greed, I think, for that to be true.
It's insane. There will be booms and busts again at some point, although I don't see one anytime soon.
There's a reason we've had cycles going back thousands of years, and I don't think that stops.
We're actually at a sweet spot.
I think the Fed is just bringing things back in line.
It's really shocking that because we've been through several periods, wherever we have a downturn, central banks respond, they elevate asset prices, that you would then take that to the conclusion that we're not going to have boom-bust cycles anymore is somewhat stunning.
We never leave the boom-bust cycle.
A lot of feedback to those comments from Bob Prince of Bridgewater. And I've got to say, Tom, the headline is slightly deceiving. It's a whole lot more nuanced than that when you actually start to hear Bob Prince talk about this. The idea being, from a central bank perspective, the boxed in, they can't stimulate much more, and at the end of the day, they're not willing to go and end the cycle by raising interest rates or tightening aggressively anytime soon. Take one. Take two. This is the one for me. We've had so many people throw cold water on this statement this week. What does that tell you about how much exuberance is actually out there at the moment?
I'd go with that, but the thing I would go with is the core theory here, which is leaden, that what the central banks have thought with lower interest rates has led to a lack of volatility. And I'm sorry, you're under 3% or near 3% global GDP.
Yeah.
That's a leaden feel, and that's the backstory, the fear out there. Does it stay?
We've got to get to the market story as well. We've got equity markets at 19 times forward earnings. We've got credit spreads.
Should I start getting in? I'm triple leveraged all cash.
You might be a little bit late.
I'm a little bit late to this.
The excess is in the market. That's going to be a conversation for us.
How about Tesla? Just an entry point here for Tesla.
I would have liked to think when you were getting out of cash, you might have gone into Tesla and caught that rally. Did you not catch that rally?
I look at this, folks, and what's interesting, there's no crisis this year. Last year, there was crisis.
Yeah.
And when there's no crisis in Davos, we go theoretical.
Why? Because the Fed came out and completely changed the story.
It's fair. There's some good charts of market expansion and profit growth, and they're really far apart. This looks great on radio. When I move my hands like this, it looks great on radio. It really looks good.
It's not some miraculous recovery in earnings. It's not some miraculous recovery in the economy. The Fed came out, engineered a massive pivot, stopped hiking, started cut, and I would say the shift in the reaction function of the Fed recently has been almost even more important for the next couple of years.
A backstory, including Francine's interview with Christine Lagarde, is we got a little more QE here than we were 90 days ago. There isn't a nuance here. It's like, okay, it's QE.
James Goldman, Morgan Stanley. It's QE. David Solomon, Goldman Sachs, just a little bit more diplomatic.
Maybe a nuance here.
Maybe QE too.
But there's the QE debate out there as well. What the answer is, folks, is we go back to a lot on this when we come back to New York. Some of these themes, these are not going to end here in Happy Valley.
Yeah. Let's head back to New York now, shall we, and catch up with Viviana Hurtado with some Bloomberg First Word News.
John, Tom, we begin with Democratic impeachment managers. They have one more day to convince U.S. Senate Republicans they want to subpoena witnesses and documents to help make their case against President Donald Trump. Here's House Intelligence Chairman Adam Schiff.
He covered it up. He obstructed us. He's trying to obstruct you. And he's violated the Constitution.
Tomorrow, the president's lawyers begin their arguments. And before Tuesday, President Trump plans to release his long-awaited Middle East peace plan. That's the day Israeli leaders visit the White House. Plenty of hurdles, though, for any proposal remain. Among them, how much of the West Bank remains under Israel's control. Palestinian leaders don't feel their side is being fairly weighted. They've refused to speak with the Trump administration. And over to Australia, that's where the bushfires there may push global carbon dioxide levels this year to a record. The UK's official forecaster saying that may have an influence on weather patterns and ecosystems. Estimates are the fires will release about 900 million metric tons of CO2 into the atmosphere. Giving you some context, that's about the same as emitted by all commercial aircraft. And Boeing's newest plane taking to the skies today for the first time. The 777X is so large that its wingtips can fold like a Navy fighter jet. It's seen as the heir apparent to the 747 jumbo jet, the plane's debut coming at a time when Boeing is trying to repair its reputation. It's the company's first new model since it's grounded the 737 MAX. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Viviana Hurtado. This is Bloomberg. Tom.
Viviana, thank you so much. For the elite here at Davos, guess what? It's a well-fed elite, and certainly that is true for so many of our listeners across America. For the rest of the world, it can be a different story. We need to go back with a little bit of history to a gentleman named Norman Borlaug, who simply changed the way we eat. The Green Revolution is certainly associated with the Nobel Peace Prize winner of decades and decades ago. And what we know is this industry of food is in search of the next Norman Borlaug. Eric Furwald with us with Syngenta Group as they look at everything from agrochemicals and agrobusiness to the heritage of Norman Borlaug, and that would be seeds. We're thrilled you could be with us today. Joe Coy, the great comedian, has a great line, rice is rice. For you guys, it's not funny, it's dead serious. Where are we right now in finding the next green revolution so many people say we need?
First of all, it's extremely important that we find the next green revolution. We have weather extremes that farming has never faced before. So just last year, the worst flooding in the history of the United States agriculture, by far. At the same time, the highest temperatures in a number of European countries like France and others, and the worst drought in the history of Australia. Massive wildfires continuing. So we have to help farmers be able to deal with these climate extremes, be able to adapt, and at the same time significantly reduce the amount of CO2 emissions, the impact on climate change from agriculture.
But here's the blunt difference. Norman Borlaug people were in tears over what he did to change the prosperity, the nutrition of country after country after country. You guys are perceived as bad guys. You're the evil chemical business. There's genetic modification, all the rest of it. How do we get your industry back to the imagery of Borlaug versus being the evil ones today?
Hasn't that happened over the last couple of years?
I'll give you one example. So Impossible Foods comes out.
Yeah.
And it's a hot product in the United States. Lots of people see that as an important element of addressing the planet's issues. Pat Brown talks about the importance of agriculture technology, about GMOs and the products that help them deal with insects, diseases, and weeds in agriculture to bring this great new food product to the world.
It is genetically modified food, which raises the question. I've been thinking about this for a while, so it's great to catch up. Why is the attitude to that so radically different to the attitudes to GMO, say, 10 years ago?
Because now the reason it's getting better now is we're starting to talk about the benefits. Before, it was only criticism about why do you need it? The world has plenty of food. There's still 1 billion people that don't have enough food. And we're seeing the benefits of being able to do things like Pat Brown talks about, not till the soil, so you leave the carbon in the soil, healthier soils, enabled by GMO and modern herbicides.
So talk to us about where this can go, the future of what many people consider synthetic biology. Where does this go in the future? How radical can this get?
The understanding of the DNA of plants enables us to accelerate natural breeding, to do natural breeding better with big data. At the same time, genetically modify it if we want to. Or even better, the modern technology is CRISPR-Cas9 and gene editing. You take what you want the plant to do. You want it to have more protein. You want it to taste better. You want it to leave more carbon in the soil. We figure out with technology how to make that happen. So now it's a matter of deciding what you want the plants to do, and we will find technology to make it happen.
Let's take this from Syngenta. With all the debates of Syngenta, we can say that for another time. This is a great conversation. Eric, when you look at, say, Sir Paul McCartney, and he is leading with many others with this huge visibility, eat less meat. How do you respond to that from the food chain, the biome reality of seed, plant, cow, or whatever the meat is, and on? How do you respond to what Sir Paul says?
The way we respond is whatever the consumer wants, the food companies will make for the consumers. So there's some consumers that want plant-based meats, Impossible, Beyond Meat, others fit that. We'll find products that better help them able to do that. At the same time, some people want to continue eating meat products. We're making meat more sustainable by growing crops that are feed products that are more sustainable and higher conversion rates in animals.
With your Chinese ownership, you must be up to speed on this horrific pork issue in China. We've shown the chart on Bloomberg Surveillance many times, put it out for Bloomberg Radio worldwide of the spike in pork prices. What is your solution to Chinese addiction to pork and to what they do under crisis like they see now?
Well, first of all, they'll import more pork for now, and the U.S. trade deal will help that. So the U.S. farmer will benefit from the exports of more pork to China. But also we've got to address the fundamental issue here. And one of the things that we do is we help control the flies and the mosquitoes, the other things that transmit the virus. So we're bringing technology to help reduce the likelihood of that virus spreading.
You mentioned Impossible Food. Let's get to business. Great time for an IPO. Why wait?
Well, we've just formed Syngenta Group.
No. I just continue, sir. Oliver, are you going to serve Beyond Meat at your IPO lunch?
Let's get to when it's going to be first.
Okay, well,
we'll serve lots of different products at our IPO.
Okay, when would that lunch be, please?
Well, we said when we were purchased by ChemChina, we said we were going to strengthen the company and IPO by the middle of 2022. We just announced the formation of the Syngenta Group, which takes the Syngenta company, adds to it the Adama company, and the agriculture assets of Sinochem. Sinochem Agriculture puts it all together, takes us from $14 billion in sales to $23 billion in sales.
Revenue growth.
And 300 million to 4 billion in China.
We got
cracked the China market.
60 seconds, Eric. When's it going to be? Clearly, you're not going to wait.
Our goal is we would love to see it happen in 2021.
2021. 43 billion is what you would bought for.
T-Bone.
Past that? 43 billion plus?
We're creating a great company, which is our goal. And then the IPO will follow.
For all of global Wall Street, if you could figure out a solution for rubber chicken, that would be great. That's what we really need as well.
Eric, fantastic to catch up with you. Syngenta Group CEO here in Davos, Switzerland. A lot more still to come. Rubber chicken.
Please.
Rubber chicken.
Which hotel has the worst rubber chicken in New York? Don't you say it.
Hey, coming up on this program, Eric Brynjolfsson of MIT. He joins us next, live from the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, for our audience worldwide on Bloomberg Radio and on Bloomberg TV on the final day in Davos, Switzerland.
This is the final day?
We're looking forward to getting back to New York City already. Yes. This is Bloomberg.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report, I'm Michael Barr. Formula One is close to concluding negotiations with teams over a new charter, a crucial piece of Liberty Media's overhaul plans for the sport. According to Chief Executive Officer Chase Carey during an interview at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, we're in the final stages of it. Billionaire John Malone's Liberty Media wants to make the sport more competitive and attract a larger audience. It has proposed race teams share revenues more evenly to keep challengers from going bankrupt. It also calls for spending limits so races are more about drivers' skills than testing who can afford the best engineering. Major League Baseball will test automated umpires during spring training. However, MLB will not use it for calling strikes and balls in exhibition games. And that is a Bloomberg Business of Sports Report. I'm Michael Barr, brought to you by Grainger, America's trusted source for industrial and safety supplies. Visit Grainger.com.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Global News.
Let's get this right, sir. You didn't see three men dressed as clowns take off in a van with a Renaissance painting because you were distracted by, and I quote, a sporty red compact SUV with a bold mesh grille, a sculpted with sweeping roofline on diamond-cut alloys.
And beautiful rear haunches.
So, you saw a Jaguar E-Pace. But what about the clowns?
What clowns?
Jaguar E-Pace, designed to steal attention. Search Jaguar E-Pace.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Along the goal line, scores! He takes it home!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores!
The action live on TuneIn Premium.
Gonna move, hit a shot, he scores!
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
Record low unemployment in the U.S. We've had kind of an oil dividend for 6 or 7 years now. You know, oil is very cheap, energy is very cheap. And so planes are full, restaurants are full, and things are going pretty well.
Stephen Paliuca, Bain Capital CEO, with Tom Keane and myself, Jonathan Ferro, just moments ago from the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. Good afternoon to you all from here. Good morning if you're on the other side of the Atlantic. What a couple of days it's been, Tom, catching up with some of the heads of states, the leader of business, the leaders of Wall Street, to get their view on just what's going on.
Without question, climate change is a jump condition here, but it's sort of a non-crisis Davos. We're not worried about the market. We're not all looking at our Bloomberg terminals on our cell phones.
Not worried about the cycle, but worried about some really big structural issues.
We're going to do that right now. There have been 2 books put out by Mr. Brynjolfsson and a guy named McAfee that stopped the technology world. There's just no question about that. Kids would walk around campuses. They wouldn't even read the book. They just carry one of the Brynjolfsson books around to be cool. He is with the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, the initiative on the digital economy, but so much more than that. His affiliation, of course, with Sloan as well. And we're honored that Professor Brynjolfsson could join us today, because I don't want to talk about the fancy mumbo jumbo. I want you to translate all the different economists that say, we're seeing this, we're seeing that, but then there's the technology overlay. Is that a crutch for mystery, or is there a technology overlay that in 10 or 20 or 50 years we're going to look back and say, that was more profound than we knew then?
Well, actually, I don't think the economists are the best people to ask about that question. I spend a lot of time in Washington, New York, and other places talking to the economists, and I think they're still catching up on the wave. And I see myself as one of the people who can translate what's happening in the tech community around MIT and Silicon Valley and elsewhere, because there's a contrast when you talk to those 2 groups. Amazing, breathtaking things happening underlying technologies, and we're just beginning to understand how that affects the economy.
You own the phrase productivity paradox.
Right.
The productivity paradox for our listeners, our viewers, is everything from their kids too much time on YouTube to the idea that they're going to lose their job, or their job will be diminished, they'll be underemployed because of this modern use of technology. Update us on the paradox, that fear that so many people feel.
Well, the real core of that paradox is this puzzling fact that while we have these breathtaking technologies, productivity growth has not increased. In fact, it's slowed down. It used to be 2.8% up to 2004. Since then, it's been 1.3%. The last quarter published in the United States was actually negative. So it's really not taking off. To me, that was a bit surprising, but when we dove in deeper, I think we understand what's going on here. And that is that businesses are not translating those technologies into new business processes, new products, new ways of doing business. And as a result, we're not harvesting that benefit. I think the real challenge for the next 10 years is not going to be so much pushing more amazing technologies, although I'm all for that. It's going to be for business leaders like the ones here in Davos to say, we got to change our businesses. Yes, there's going to be restructuring. Yes, some workers are going to have to learn new skills. And that's a painful, difficult process. But it's what we have to do if we want to get the benefits of technology.
Let's talk about something else that's painful, taxes. One of the moments of the World Economic Forum last year, 12 months ago, and for our audience that may not have seen this, go to YouTube, find it. It was a panel, Michael Dow, Professor Brynjolfsson, talking about taxes. And Michael Dow came out and said 60, 70, 80% taxes on the top rate. Tell me a country where this has worked. And you sparked up and you said the United States, the 1950s.
Not just the 50s, the 60s, the 70s. There was about a 30-year period.
Yeah.
And, productivity growth, economic growth, standards of living did reasonably well. So I'm not going to weigh in on what the exact right tax rate is. It's just that as a professor, when I hear someone make a statement that calls for a correction, I couldn't resist stepping in.
Well, let's talk about that, because you haven't put your views out there, but I sense a disappointment in the level, the sophistication of the conversation around issues like this right now. Have they improved in the last 12 months?
No, they've continued to get worse. I mean, the big disappointment since we wrote that book, The Second Machine Age, has been that while the technology has gone, if anything, faster than we thought, the policy response has not been commensurate. In fact, in many ways, people seem to be looking backwards. Let's try to bring back coal, or let's try to stop the technology from advancing. And taxes is part of that. It's not necessarily that we need higher or lower taxes. We need smarter taxes, like carbon taxes, that will direct innovation and energy and efforts into areas that make the planet better.
Right. There's a small school upriver from MIT. I can't remember.
What's the name?
I can't remember. There's a guy named Rogoff there, and in our panel this week, he went right to Brynjolfsson 101, which is a carbon tax is more visible, more countable, more transparent versus all the other auction theories that are out there. Explain to someone listening to us right now. Al from New Jersey emailed in today. Tell Al from New Jersey right now how you affect a carbon tax for New Jersey, for Nebraska, and for the Netherlands. How do you do this?
Well, what Al needs to understand is that the carbon tax should and will, I hope, be coupled with a carbon dividend. So Al will probably come out ahead because the money that's collected will be paid back evenly. Nonetheless, that will lead to a lot less use of carbon because polluting industries will have to bear the price. Economics 101 is that if you don't have to pay the cost that you're imposing on society, you're going to do too much of that. You're going to pollute too much. But if you do pay the price through a carbon price, then you will cut back on that.
Brilliantly explained, Professor, but the core of the matter is Ronald Coase 101 is society doesn't believe what you just said. They say Al from New Jersey and Peter from Amsterdam aren't going to have, but come on, they're not, they have a distrust in Amsterdam that they're going to get taken by Warsaw, Poland. Al from New Jersey has a distrust, he's going to be taken by that person out in Nebraska. How do you guys fix that?
Well, you know, economists disagree on a lot of things, but there's almost universal agreement on this. Steve Mnuchin said something really good earlier this week. He said we should listen to the economists on climate change. The economists are almost unanimous that a carbon tax is the way to go. I agree with Ken, my colleague up at Harvard, and 3,000 other economists, 27 Nobel Prize winners. There's a letter on this that we all signed, the most economists ever signing one letter in history, and the proposal is for a $40 carbon tax and a dividend. So I hope that Steve and Mnuchin and the rest of the administration does listen to the economists.
I hate to say it, though. Economists, and whether people should trust economists, don't exactly get the best of raps, do they?
Well, maybe not. Maybe they do. But in this issue, they do. We all agree.
Eric, very quickly, when's the next book out? You and Mac,
working on it.
Still, are you guys on speaking terms still?
We actually shared a apartment here in Davos, which was great.
John and I did not. They put us at separate ends of the valley. There's a photo that went out last night, folks. I don't know who took that photo. Should be shot. I mean, come on.
Well, it was great because the sad reality is both of us spend a lot of time on the road, so we don't see each other at MIT as much as we should. So sometimes we have to come to Davos to catch up.
Wouldn't that be great if we just caught up with each other?
Maybe you and I should write a book together.
We'll write a book separately and then get together.
You're still friends after writing a book. That's the real test of it.
That is very good.
Great to see you, Professor Eric Brynjolfsson of MIT. Al from New Jersey is our boss.
He's all of our bosses.
He's listening.
He's gung ho carbon tax. He's got that Tesla he's driving.
Does Eric want him to be
gung ho? Gung ho carbon tax.
Not sure he does. Coming up on this program, Robert Schiller of Yale University,
Boom bust.
economics professor, and Chrystia Freeland, Canadian Deputy Prime Minister, will be joining us very shortly on Bloomberg Surveillance.
Business is constantly... Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, keep me out the cold jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, East London jobs, West London jobs, extra hour in bed jobs, startup jobs, late start jobs, get home in the daylight jobs, banking jobs, building jobs, flexible working on a Friday jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
I've always loved a kitchen experiment, especially smoothies. I've blended all sorts of mad combinations. Strawberry and charcoal, broccoli and chocolate. Not my best, that. But when I test blenders in the Witch Lab, it's not about flavour, it's about performance. Our tests use proper tough stuff, hard ice, strong veg, rough nuts. And the blenders that can hack it are the only ones we recommend for your kitchen.
Which tests harder so you can buy smarter. Visit which.co.uk.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
On a TUI tour, Our English-speaking local guides will take you off the tourist trail. They won't just help you find the perfect souvenir, they'll show you how to make it. Choose from over 70 unforgettable tours worldwide. From tranquil temples in India to sunrise safaris in South Africa. On a TUI tour, we cross the T's, dot the I's, and put you in the middle. Book now and enjoy up to £200 off per booking. Booking T's and C's and minimum spend applies. Selected holidays only. At all protected.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Go courtside with the NBA on TuneIn. With the NBA on TuneIn, hear your favorite team and players take on their biggest rivals during the biggest games throughout the year, including regular season showdowns, the 2020 All-Star Game, and the NBA Finals in June, featuring the home and away calls for all 30 teams. Plus, with the NBA On Demand, relive the best moments of the season by listening to the past games in their entirety. Listen to the NBA all season long on TuneIn.
Upgrade to TuneIn Premium and get over 45 commercial-free music stations. You'll also get live commercial-free news, plus live play-by-play games from NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Cutting for the net, scores! On the goal line, Marchand scores!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
And tucks it home!
And with this team, it's really fun to be a part of a team like that.
You can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium. From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
Time.
We always talk about the losers in a trade war.
You benefit if you're just further away from China.
So that you can too.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone, from Davos, Switzerland. Friday, the World Economic Forum meetings. Thank you for joining us. It is Davos, and it is the least snowy Davos in my 16 years here. It's remarkable to see some of the mountains up the valley with no snow on them, just rock. Different views this year at Davos. For those of you on radio, it's real simple. The sidewalks are Faro clean here, a lot less ice than anything you'd ever seen.
We're going to tell our audience what happened last year when I went flat on my face.
John Farrell falling flat on his face last year. You heard it live on Bloomberg Radio. It was some audio tape last year. We welcome all of you on radio and on television as well. An important day here to wrap up some real interesting thoughts that we're going to take back to New York. And one of them, a surprise to me, was the battle over Ray Dalio and Bob Prince at Bridgewater's idea. Boom bust is over.
Cash is trash.
Cash is trash, and the rest of it, I'll tell you, this has been a firestorm of heated response, and we have a true authority on this. Robert Schiller of Yale University will join us, the Nobel laureate.
Really, we're looking forward to that conversation. Not only will we be catching up with him, we'll also be talking to the Canadian Deputy Prime Minister, Christian Freeland. We'll do that a little bit later in around about an hour and 40 minutes, Tom, after that tragic incident.
Really
in Iran
difficult.
Just a couple of weeks back. A difficult time for that country and some big issues to get through. But for the markets, as you were in the United States, the pain in Asia. And I think the story coming out of here, what is happening in China, and how this story develops in the coming weeks, is just going to dominate the conversation.
On a societal basis, and also just what it means more visibly for the markets as well. I would say that our reporting here, Selena Wang and our Tom McKenzie, has been very straightforward. Into their late Friday, a dearth of news as they almost recalibrate or regroup.
If you can hear some banging or a little bit of disruption.
That's the sun deck. The surveillance. It's the surveillance.
It's not the sun deck.
It's the surveillance sun deck, and I was out there as well.
It's not the sun deck. They're sort of taking everything down around us as we close the World Economic Forum down on the final day. The fences are coming down, and there's some people working in and around the studio. So Forgive us. We'll carry on as we can. I believe someone's gone out there to...
They got my six-pack of Pabst Blue Ribbon out there. They still have from when I was sunning earlier.
Is that a treat?
As well. Why don't you tell them about what we're going to listen to here on Bloomberg Radio and Bloomberg Television?
We're going to get into the markets big time. We need to talk about QE and the future of the balance sheet program at the Federal Reserve. We arrived in Davos, Switzerland. It was a massive debate. We leave. It's still a massive debate. Is it or isn't it QE? Take a listen to two of the biggest leaders on Wall Street, David Solomon of Goldman Sachs, James Gorman of Morgan Stanley.
The monetary policy that's been around and has been in place for a long time obviously has been an enormous stimulus. When we sit here today and I kind of think about, the path forward, I think we're now in a period this year after three mid-cycle cuts, for lack of a better term, that I don't expect a lot from the Fed in the context of this year. Obviously, the balance sheet's come down a lot over the course of the last couple of years. All of this supports or impacts liquidity in markets, and I think the Fed has done a reasonable job managing liquidity in markets, even with a speed bump back.
So I'll ask it again then. Is that QE as they start to buy T-bills and the balance sheet starts to expand again?
Anytime the Fed uses its resources to affect liquidity in some way, shape, or form, it's having an impact on markets. I'm not going to answer the question the way you're looking for me to answer it, because I don't think it's a black and white answer. You tell me what QE is. I think that everyone observed that the Fed had a very, very significant balance sheet investment, and it reduced that balance sheet. There have been a bunch of regulatory inputs to the amount of liquidity that banks need to hold as the regulations have changed. And at some point, you can reach a supply-demand where, for a variety of reasons, some of them can be idiosyncratic around a moment in time, maybe tax payments, that the supply-demand of liquidity changes and the price for short-term liquidity rises. And we saw that. The Fed responded appropriately by saying we want to make sure that there's enough liquidity in the system. I think all the banks also, I know we did, I can't speak for others, we positioned ourselves so at the end of the year when we thought liquidity might be tight, we have liquidity to contribute.
The Fed only has two real tools that they're working with at the moment, and they've pretty much exhausted the rates. So that's the reality. So they've only got the balance sheet that they're working with, and it is a form of QE. I mean, it has been subsidizing prices. It's been helping the markets along, and they've done it for good reason. I mean, when they raised rates, 12, 14 months ago, the markets took a scare. So I think the Fed is just bringing things back in line. The Fed's providing liquidity to the market, right? They're providing an underpinning to say, we're here. That's basically the message. It's a message of confidence as much as it is of activity.
James Gorman of Morgan Stanley there alongside David Solomon of Goldman Sachs. Is it or isn't it QE? James Gorman, no question about it. It's QE. David Solomon, a little bit more diplomatic, but what they both share, it supports the market.
Yeah, the toolkit really came up here. And what I've noticed here in the last 90 days, and this isn't the zeitgeist that's out within global Wall Street, but you really heard it from these bankers. They don't really care about the nuances. They're just saying their prosperity in the last 12 months has mostly come from central bank action.
Supported financial markets. It's pretty clear over the last 12 months. Even if you don't think buying T-bills is supporting this market at the moment, you cannot deny that the rate cuts of last year, the massive shift in the reaction function, just the very idea that we sit here, if inflation increases, we won't move, that is what's offering just even more support to risk assets and to valuations.
As we go back to New York, John, the immovable force here is what you hear. We're data dependent. The data is going to come in, and as we left New York to come here, a raging debate for all of our listeners and viewers on what is American growth right now, what is global growth right now. I don't know where that debate's going to settle out. Steve Stanley at Amherst Pierpont, optimist. SocGen really quite cautious. BNP Paribas quite cautious as well.
So the ECB and the Federal Reserve are in the middle of developing a strategy review. The Federal Reserve is coming towards the end of theirs. The ECB is just getting theirs started. And at the ECB, there was a takeaway in the last 24 hours that just maybe central bank policy was on autopilot. ECB President Christine Lagarde, speaking to Bloomberg's Francine Lacroix, saying anything but. Take a listen.
Last time we had a strategy review was in 2003. The growth was much higher in those days. Inflation was higher. The prospect of the various demographics around the world were different. The world has massively changed. We didn't use those social media as much as we do. We hardly had a cell phone in those days. So, okay.
Can you give us then a sense of the future timetable for these reviews? Should it be a regular thing?
That's to be debated. First of all, the initial timetable that we're setting for ourselves, which is ambitious, I acknowledge that, is to try to conclude before the end of this year. So December 2020, hopefully we will have reached that platform of consensus on the various topics that we have. Now, do we have to repeat the exercise every 5 years, every 8 years, every 16 years as we have? I have my views as well. And we will debate that with the group to see how necessary it is, how helpful it can be.
The markets are interpreting the exercise as maybe having a little bit of a dovish tilt. And you look at housing costs and you look maybe at side effects of negative rates.
I'm an owl. I'm not a dove. I'm not a hawk. And there are doves and hawks around the table, I take it.
But what signs should markets be looking at in the review to give us a sense of where it goes?
If markets are interested in what happens in the next 12 months, they should not pay too much attention to the strategy review, because we're conducting two separate exercises here. We will have our monetary policy assessment and review as usual. Every 6 weeks, we all get together, we look at the numbers, we look at the markets, we look at the views of the citizens in terms of inflation expectations, and we decide whether things should be statu quo, whether they should vary one way or the other. And that exercise will be conducted irrespective of the strategy review. So to those who say, oh, it's going to be completely static and stable for 12 months, I'd say, watch out, because things change. And we might have different signals and we might reconsider. We might. I don't know at this point in time. What I know for sure is that it will be two different exercises. And the strategy review will be on its own, on a standalone basis, and will progress because we are looking at what we do in the future, not what we do next week or in May or in July.
So is it almost a warning to the markets not to overinterpret too quickly?
They always overinterpret. You know, they're going to look at my face and see, well, is she smiling? Is she dovish? Is she hawkish? I told them on day one, I said, don't overinterpret. We will say what we can say. And I know that some people are disappointed that we haven't said much more yesterday. But a strategy review starts here, finishes there, and you cannot here say what you're going to do there. Otherwise, you don't do a strategy review. And we need to do a lot of stock taking, looking at the effectiveness of what we've done, learn from other countries around the world as well in the process. You know that the Fed is undergoing the same exercise. And we need to take time to reach out to the Parliament, to academics, to people, to those who are interested in these issues, to hear the voices, to understand what their views are. We will listen to markets as well, but they are one of the voices that we will listen to.
Economists believe that monetary policy at the ECB will be largely on autopilot for the next 2 years. Is that a mistake?
No, I just told you. To those who think that it's autopilot, I think that's ridiculous. There is a forward guidance which is strong, which is setting, a very clear timetable that is fact dependent. But let's look at the facts. Let's look at how the economy evolves. That's what we do. We need to be fact driven. We need to be clear in our communication, and we will be. And I'm saying today, don't assume that it will be on autopilot.
Yesterday you talked quite extensively about negative rates. You said tiering is working well, but is there a point where actually the side effects of negative rates means that you need to scale it back?
We will be looking at the side effects as part of the strategy review. There's no question about that. We need to be attentive to that. Financial stability is not our first driver of concern and consideration, but we will have to look at it, of course. Yeah. And don't forget that we need to have a banking sector in the euro area that acts as a good channel of transmission.
President Lagarde, she is not the managing director of the International Monetary Fund, still so new on the job, we need to remind you every time. And there was a very different body language to Madame Lagarde here. There's a promenade through the espresso bar and all, and you really observe here that she has moved on to a new set of responsibilities.
It's a really high-pressure job. And it took its toll on President Draghi quite clearly.
Yes, without question. And Trichet, Mr. Trichet as well.
It's a big challenge for the 12 months ahead as well. The Governing Council is divided. That's not new news. It has been divided for quite a while. It's divided on a whole range of issues, including negative interest rates, and how that develops in the coming months as this strategy review takes place. For me, it's going to be fascinating because for the Federal Reserve, as their strategy review rolled on, it became increasingly clear that some of that actually leaked into policy decisions. as it was happening, and that it's become a part of the reaction function before the strategy review is even complete. And I wonder how it will develop at the ECB as well. A question for the next several months.
You were brilliant there, though, on this idea that at the Fed, whether governors or 12 presidents, you're all in the same country. For any central bank head here, you're doing a policy review with constituencies that are radically different than the strategic debate in the United States.
There has been a suggestion in the past, and a suggestion that I've had some sympathy for, that perhaps in the future, if you really wanted to adapt the ECB and the makeup of the Governing Council, that it might be slightly more effective, maybe even more productive. Not my suggestion, it's many other people who are making this suggestion, to have it by region and not by country, like we do in the United States in the Federal Reserve System, that we do it by regions. We don't just do it by state. And I wonder if that's something that we could see happen in the ECB, maybe not in the next few years, but perhaps somewhere further down the line in the future.
Let's go back to New York right now. We've got 1 minute here, folks, to really drive forward to January 29th. From here, what does that Fed meeting look like with the way the rate regime has come down over the last 3 weeks?
If inflation doesn't pick up, where does it leave the Federal Reserve? We know what will happen if inflation picks up. They've told us they won't move. But if it starts to roll over again, I will point out the US 10-year yield now is below the Fed funds rate again.
Idea. We're going to Zurich. Should we open a Swiss bank account?
Would you like to do that?
On the way back, we can open a Swiss bank account.
Negative 75 basis points.
There we go.
Your deposits.
That's even worse than my triple leveraged all cash fund.
Coming up on the program, the Trump administration's victory lap right here in Davos, Switzerland. This is Bloomberg.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing, LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at bevel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Influential conversation.
Welcome to Nuffield Health Battersea, a gym built around you. You get regular health MOTs to create a plan that works for you, with physios and personal trainers on site. You'll find a wide range of equipment and classes, and our expert team will support you to get the most out of your health, fitness, and your membership. Join today to get the rest of the month free. Search Nuffield Health. Specialists in you. 12-month commitments only. Facilities stated are in most gyms. Visit nuffieldhealth.com/terms.
At the Bank of Santander, they've created Stan, a smart bot that can predict the future of remortgaging.
All right, Stan, will my mortgage rate go up?
1955 was the last time Newcastle won the cup.
No, and try not to mumble.
Playing, let's get ready to rumble.
Meanwhile, at Santander, they can't predict your future, but they'll help secure it with great mortgage rates fixed for up to 10 years. See what's possible at Santander.
Early repayment charges apply. Lending subject to status and criteria. Your home may be repossessed if you do not keep up repayments on your mortgage.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Good morning, everyone. From Davos, the World Economic Forum meetings, it has been perfect weather, a perfect Friday here, many people leaving. We really should paint the picture of that, John. We are up a long train ride from Zurich. It is a beautiful train ride. I didn't know this. It goes right by Liechtenstein.
Very
I hope
close.
I'm pronouncing that
I think
close.
Close enough.
Never been there. And we're sort of on the edge of Italy. And I don't know what's behind us right here with this view, if that's Italy or Liechtenstein or Germany or...
I keep telling our audience on radio, Tom's got no clue.
I see, for those of you on Bloomberg Radio, I see elephants in the distance. They're going over the Alps.
I promise you this, though. Tom did actually get the train here, and a little bit later this afternoon, Tom will actually get the train back to Zurich, and I'll be doing that with him. And if you don't believe that Tom is going to sit on a very, very small train seat for the best part of 3 hours, I'll take a picture for you, and I'll put it out on social.
Major shout out to Tyler Boulay over at Monaco, who guilted me into this as I'm going green and doing...
Well, if we're going to talk about the climate, turning up in a private jet probably isn't the best way of doing it,
It's not doing it. And folks, you can sit, very quickly, or you can sit in the beautiful Zurich airport, and off in the distance, the private jets are laid out
it's
like
not even funny when you think about it, isn't it?
No, it's not.
The whole stink of hypocrisy sometimes.
John over the Gulf Stream, Francine Lacroix taking the Gulf Stream back to London as well. Why don't you bring in these conversations, these government conversations of early Davos?
It's been quite a week here in Davos, Switzerland, and we've had a lot of conversations about the global economy, ESG, climate change, all of that really important stuff. But something that really stuck out for a lot of us is the situation between the United States and Europe. Europe is still fighting for better growth numbers. The United States is on a victory lap.
America is winning.
The spirit right now is better than it's been in a while.
This is not a time for pessimism. This is a time for optimism. Fear and doubt is not a good thought process, because this is a time for tremendous hope and joy and optimism and action.
You give us a chance. You give the United States a chance to sell you goods and services and technology and energy and agriculture and so forth, and we will beat the pants off everybody. We will outcompete. Just give us a chance to do that.
The United States concluded 2 extraordinary trade deals. The agreement with China and the United States, Mexico, Canada agreement, the 2 biggest trade deals ever made. They just happened to get done in the same week.
The decks are cleared to some extent. We got China, we got USMCA. Both of them are pro-growth. Now we'll have probably...
Europe's the next focus?
To use a hackneyed cliche, we have more bandwidth now to focus on Europe.
That was the campaign message almost from the US administration in the last couple of days. Quite remarkable. They're celebrating their achievements. Many of you might disagree with them. That's what a debate is about. 2 sides to every conversation. For me, though, what stood out was a lack of a conversation about defending capitalism. I, for one, would love to see more of that, at least have a conversation about it in 12 months' time. We had one guest that volunteered that defense. It was Stacey Cunningham at the New York Stock Exchange. Take a listen.
Why should they be public sooner? And there are a lot of conversations around why they're staying private longer, and you can talk about that. It's capital, it's regulation, it's all these things. But with the downsides to the fact that they're staying private means there's less discipline and governance in companies, which at a much larger company that's much more impactful. There is less clarity around valuation. So are these companies worth what the private markets are saying, or do you need the wisdom and the disclosures and transparency of the public markets to determine that? And it's creating a bifurcation of wealth.
Let's talk about pressure, the pressure on you guys at the moment. We've had the likes of Larry Fink of BlackRock talk about leaning on the active management world to lean out of some companies, let's say in coal. The pressure really is going to have to be put on the index providers to say to them, you need to get these companies out of the index. That's going to make the most difference. The pressure is also going to be on the exchanges. Why allow these companies to list on your exchange?
I think it's really important to make sure that investors have access to opportunities and the right to choose. And so by putting them on exchanges and giving them information about their disclosures is helpful for they can make informed decisions. I think it's really important to recognize what the conversations I've been having here in Davos over the past few days are from many CEOs who are saying we've been doing all of the work around ESG already because it's important to our employees. It's important to our customers that we take a stand on these issues, even more so than their investors.
So Stacey, let me ask you this, because I imagine it's come up multiple times, not just at this conference, but over the last few months, maybe the last few years as well. You have minimum standards to be listed on the New York Stock Exchange. Minimum market cap, minimum amount of shareholders as well. Why not have ESG as part of that?
Because our standards are very focused on investor protections. And if those companies stay private, the conversations we're having are really connected, right? If we put so many standards around requirements for companies to be public, they have alternatives. It's a different dynamic than it was years ago when you actually had to come to the public markets to get money. Because there is money available in the private market space, we don't want investors to be denied those opportunities entirely.
This is not your remit, but I want your opinion on this because it's important. Faro has just recovered from the shock of losing that much money on his 8,000 shares of Uber that he bought.
Don't listen to this.
How do you respond when on your floor they do the song and dance of an IPO or even a secondary, but particularly initial public offerings, and they come out and they do the whole modern media dance and the thing goes down X%? That's not good for the brand, is it?
I think we should keep in mind that in a large IPO like that, they sold $8 billion worth of stock, and it opened at a price and stayed right there. Now, over time, investors were reacting to the valuation of companies, and as companies go public,
your job is to get it open in the early minutes.
And to make sure that investors have the information.
Did they have the information on those
and you'll see it's a great example of private valuations versus public valuations. And so we need to actually make sure companies get out. And this shift, because they don't need capital, is actually why the direct listing was an innovation that we delivered this year, because it's actually not about raising money. It's about, in those cases.
Stacey, you're nailing. There's a private valuation. They go public and selected stocks tank. Whose responsibility is that? It's not you. Who is it? Who's responsible?
I think investors are asking questions that they weren't asking before, and I think that's what you're going to see in 2020, is that investors are asking about profitability and valuations. And when you have limited people participating in the private space, you're limiting access to opportunity, and you're also limiting access to information.
We knew that would be a good interview, but it was not good. It was a great interview with a former intern of the NYSE, now the president, Stacey Cunningham. Really, really, really good interview. What did you learn there about the loss you took on 8,000 shares of Uber?
I think there's going to be more pressure on the exchanges and on indexes in the.
I agree. I totally agree after the train wreck.
As we talk about these issues on climate, sustainability, ESG, look, at the end of the day, if you want to make a massive difference, it's up to the index whether they're going to list these companies as part of those index and whether the exchanges are actually going to list them as well.
What's so important here is the idea that the system is gamed, or the private market's taking the gain and they're dumping it on the public market. And you really wonder how that plays out, not in 1 year, but even in 5 years as well.
I think Stacey made quite an eloquent argument that to really encourage participation in some of these big growth stories,
you have to have loss.
You've got to also get these companies to market earlier so that retail and a broader market set of participants can be involved in the transactions and be involved in the growth. It's one argument out there, Tom.
I go back to the old days of prospectus and red herrings, and as we were talking earlier, rubber chicken at lunches. Coming up, the laureate, Robert Shiller of Yale University.
Look forward to it.
He's very boom. He's very bust. This is Bloomberg.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients, and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com. And feel the power. Member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
Vatsal Shah is senior project engineer at Mott MacDonald,
a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor, is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city on the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that? So in 10 years, we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water. NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials, so taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
This is a Bloomberg.
At the Bank of Santander, they've created Stan, a smart bot that can predict the future of remortgaging.
I'll read Stan. Will my mortgage rate go up?
1955 was the last time Newcastle won the cup.
No, try not to mumble.
Playing, let's get ready to rumble.
Meanwhile, at Santander, they can't predict your future, but they'll help secure it with great mortgage rates fixed for up to 10 years. See what's possible at Santander.
Early repayment charges apply. Lending subject to status and criteria. Your home may be repossessed if you do not keep up repayments on your mortgage.
This is not a cat. This is not a rocket. And this is not a sale. That's right. At Smarty Mobile, we're not having a sale. While others are slashing prices, we're introducing our best ever new plans. Take our new 30-gig data SIM for just £10 a month. With unlimited calls and texts and no speed restrictions, credit checks or contract tying you down, why shop around? New plans, great value. Now that's Smarty. Grab yours today. Search Smarty Mobile. See smarty.co.uk for terms.
Hello, I'm your captain for today's Virgin Atlantic flight. Please drop everything and pay close attention to the following announcement. The sail is now on. Our crew are ready to take your bags and stresses away. The cocktails are ready to serve, the movies are loaded, and we're all set for takeoff to the Caribbean. So, take your seat in our award-winning economy class. We're ready to go when you are.
The Virgin Atlantic sail. Fly amazing for less. For more details, visit virginatlantic.com.
Saying that for centuries.
There's a reason we've had cycles going back thousands of years, and I don't think that stops. It's insane.
If you take the history of the United States since the late 70s, I would call monetary policy a policy of bubble to bubble.
It's really shocking that because we've been through several periods, wherever we have a downturn, central banks respond, they elevate asset prices, that you would then take that to the conclusion that we're not going to have boom-bust cycles anymore is somewhat stunning.
There will be booms and busts again at some point, although I don't see one anytime soon.
I don't think the cycles are done.
There's always a view that the old rules don't apply now. And that overconfidence it's really human nature.
You've been listening to a collection of our interviews here in Davos, Switzerland, at the World Economic Forum. Good afternoon to you all on Bloomberg Surveillance, on Bloomberg Radio, on Bloomberg TV. Carmen Reinhardt there of Harvard, James Gorman of Morgan Stanley, Troy Gayeski of Skybridge Capital, and Scott Meinert of Guggenheim, together with David Solomon of Goldman Sachs, responding to that interview with Bob Prince and Bridgewater. Just that simple statement, the boom-bust cycle as we know it is over. His words.
I'm so proud of our team in that they have, John, come in with bankers like Gorman, leading academics, and particularly the history template that Carmen Reinhardt brings to it. Troy Gayeski looking at alternative investments. At that, the mix of that was really strong.
Brilliant, diverse collection of interviews about some really, really important issues. Your price action this morning, around about 60 minutes away from the equity cash open in New York City. Actually, we're in the United States. Let's get to some of that price action. Cross asset worldwide. Over in China, it's been a tough week for the country and for the market too. The S&P 500 in the United States on the week pretty much unchanged, positive 0.2%. In the bond market, your yield 173, yields through the week just heading south, lower. In the FX market, euro dollar 110.35, Tom, we come in 0.2%.
With this boom bust debate, folks, in 16 years here, that means it's been 16 times in speaking with Robert Shiller of Yale University. He is a Nobel laureate. And that's all wonderful, and there's always any number of themes, but he is definitive in speaking on this boom-bust debate. and we're thrilled that Robert Schuller could join us this morning. There is an irrational exuberance that comes from up 28% in the stock market. You defined this phrase, irrational exuberance. People talk of the normal cyclicals. Carmen Reinhart heated that nothing's changed. This time is not different as well. And others saying at the zero bound, there's a leadenness to the markets, to the economy. Have we abandoned the normal boom-bust cycles you learned from Franco Modigliano?
I don't think human nature is stable, and I don't see any fundamental changes. In fact, if anything, we have a huge boom in the stock market, a huge boom in the real estate market, a huge boom in the bond market. So this isn't the time when I would say the death knell for boom-bust cycles.
There are two places to go here, Bob. One is to talk about the zero bound and the lower interest rate regime we're in, and the other is to talk on the asset side about asset bubbles. I'm going to let the gentleman of the real yield talk about the lower bound. I'm going to talk to you right now about the clear understanding in this valley, which is all that's going on has led to an irrational exuberance in the equity markets, and at the same time, bond price up, yields down. Is this an era, a moment, a 2020 of irrational exuberance?
But it doesn't, the word exuberance suggests excitement. And it doesn't seem as exciting as it did in 1999 at the previous big peak. I call it the millennium boom. There was new technology that was really strikingly different. It was the internet boom, the dot-com bubble. It doesn't feel like that now. But I still think it doesn't mean it can't collapse.
And Bob and John Farrell, that's what Bob Prince would suggest as well, is that it's not 1999, and that's where he goes into the theme of leadness.
I'm just wondering how you're thinking about some of these issues at the moment. We've had so much pushback to that statement about the boom-bust cycle ending. There was a front cover in Barron's over the previous weekend which said Dow 30K, and even though that's just around the corner, there was a ton of pushback against that as well. Just in terms of human behavior, Professor, the amount of pushback, can we take that as a sign that actually still, if there's enough doubt, then there's not a lot of exuberance?
Exuberance is a basket that you might put, but there's different moods, different human emotions have coloration, and they attach to certain notions of what they remember and what might happen. We also have these confidence indexes, and people seem to think that summarizes confidence, but confidence can mean so many different emotions. So right now, we are in a kind of politically dominant. Have you heard about these impeachment hearings?
Yeah.
No, we're here in Happy Valley.
Carry on, Professor.
So the mood is always qualitatively different. When we're trying to predict bubbles, we're trying to predict the human mind.
Yeah.
And it's very complicated. Now, I think that people know that stocks are highly priced and real estate is highly priced. Other major corrections didn't give any early warning. And you might have a sense, though, that there are doubts on people. The doubt about the valuation of the market is there, and doubts about our president and what will happen with the next year are prevalent right now. So I don't see that it's a time when we can't have a major correction down.
Professor, you've talked about a really important concept in your book, Economic Narratives, and you did a fantastic job, I have to say that, in that book, of just taking quite complex things with real data, real math behind it, and made it really digestible and easy to understand. We have an economic cheerleader in the White House. You've made this point. You bring up the impeachment proceedings. The impeachment proceedings are happening. The trial is taking place. And yet the President of the United States is in Davos, Switzerland, taking a victory lap about the economy.
That's right.
Now, we can joke about these issues. You think they're important. Why is that important?
See, this is one place where I tend to lavish praise on Trump. He does understand narratives. And he knows how to experiment with them, try them out in front of audiences, and go for the ones that work. That's the technology of modern narrative building. So I think he is partly responsible for the so-called strong economy. I don't like to use that word. We used to talk about hyper-speculative economies or overheated economies. you don't seem to hear that language.
Right. Well, we don't see that with GDP where it is versus where it was 20, 30 years ago, real GDP. If you're just joining us on Bloomberg Radio and Bloomberg Television, Robert Schiller with us, the laureate of Yale University, always a spirited conversation, 5 ways to go with him. And today we really talk about some of the cycles, the oddities of the conversations we've heard here in Davos as we come back to New York. We'll be with you on Monday as well. Bob Schiller, so much of this is about the realization that interest rates have come down, back to where they were decades and decades ago. And Ray Dalio, Bob Prince, with some heartfelt emotion, not talking their book, are saying this time is different, a Rogoff-Reinhardt phrase, because we're with the lower interest rates, lower bound, and negative interest rates. Can you state this time is different because of negative rates in this Switzerland?
Yeah, the negative rates are a surprise, but they're not that negative. I think
that's the heart of the matter, is we didn't get to the amplitude described by Ken Rogoff or described by the late Marvin Goodfriend, did we?
Actually, the low interest rates is a sign that the Fed can't do as much as it did to resuscitate the economy in the past. That's a cause for alarm, not confidence.
We could sit here and say the boom-bust cycle is dead and still be depressed, because ultimately what it suggests, and what Bob Prince of Bridgewater suggested earlier this week, is that central banks are boxed in, they can't stimulate and they can't tighten, and ultimately we might be left with something that looks a little bit more like Japan. Not his words precisely.
Right. That's the narrative, the Japan narrative.
How important is it to push back against that narrative at the moment, Professor?
What do you mean?
Is that something that can just sort of grip everything and everyone?
See, that has been the narrative of this of the long expansion. We're going through the longest expansion, but it's also the slowest expansion. And the slowness has something to do with that idea. It's also called secular stagnation. And there are people inventing reasons for it, like demographics, the baby boomers.
Right.
But I think it's also just kind of a new, as Keynes said, a conventional basis of valuation. We're just kind of used to these low interest rates, and the surprising thing is long rates are or even negative, going way out.
Well, then what is your prescription to play off of your wonderful book, Finance and the Good Society? Let's bring in the laureate Ned Phelps of Columbia. Dynamism,
right,
and the good society. Robert Gordon of Northwestern would suggest we're not going to recapture the dynamism of another time. Baloney, we don't have a choice. We must recapture that dynamism. How do you do that? What's the real economy process, not to eliminate the boom or the bust, but to make it more booming?
Yeah, booms and busts aren't that bad if they focus attention on business. And they bring people into thinking about business. If you shut down that, people would return to gambling on a higher.
How do we get
just a game?
Bob Schiller, how do we get to the dynamism that Ned Phelps has been so eloquent about recently?
I'm a big admirer of Phelps. I don't know that he has I think it's hard to actually bring it back because it depends on narratives. Horatio Alger, you've heard of him.
He was an economist. Where was he?
He wrote a number of books for boys, showing Bill Gates type boyish figures who make it really big in this novel.
Okay, so all the Horatio Alger people are up in this valley. Our listeners and our viewers, they're kids. They're saying, we don't accept 2% GDP. I don't want to go back to Morning in America, but I want to find that dynamism. What is your prescription to get from point A to point dynamism?
Well, one thing that we're really struggling with is a feeling of obsolescence. People today, some of them are inspired by the digital revolution and the things that are happening, but others of them feel that they're going to be left behind. That's a real problem. You bring up Phelps. He wants to have in his book Rewarding Work, he wants to have subsidies to corporations that hire low-income people. And so it's a face-saving way of subsidizing and reducing the sense of inequality. Now, that's not a direct answer to your question, how do we get dynamic? The U.S. is kind of the center for dynamism. We ought to be able to get it back. So I think Donald Trump, again, I'm praising Donald Trump.
You are.
Okay, it's a surveillance break exclusive here. Someone from Yale University is praising the president
of the United States.
Finish up with one more thought of the president, please.
He also couples that with unpredictability, which is a hamper on business. If you don't know what he's going to do next.
Well said.
Professor, it's great to see you, and always great to catch up with you as well.
That was really, we got a rationally exuberant there about Schiller and Boom Bust.
We did. We did, and I will say it again. Economic Narratives, fantastic book. Really enjoyed that, Professor. Thank you very much. Robert Schiller there of Yale University. Still a lot to come, Tom. We've got to talk about the market reaction that we've had from most of our guests here in Davos, Switzerland. We caught up with Guggenheim's Scott Minard. Looking forward to bringing our audience some of that interview as well. And then a little bit later in the next hour, a really quite important interview, I think, to end our time here in Davos, Switzerland, with the Deputy Prime Minister of Canada.
And Chrystia Freeland has cleared her schedule to do this. This is really, really something. On this Friday, to have her join us after what Canada's been through is extraordinary.
We appreciate her time, and we're looking forward to the conversation a little bit later this afternoon in Switzerland, this morning for a lot of you on the other side of the Atlantic. Let's get you some price action, shall we? We are 47 minutes away from the opening bell in New York City, and your scores shape up as follows. Futures,
look at the yield.
A lift, we advanced 0.2%, and yields closing out a week 172 on a US 10-year, down a single basis point. Not much to discuss on euro dollar 110.37, coming in around about 0.16%. From Davos, Switzerland, for our audience worldwide on a final day of the World Economic Forum, alongside Tom Keane, I'm Jonathan Ferro. This is Bloomberg.
This is your Bloomberg Real Estate Report. I'm Denise Pellegrini. Office space may be about to get a lot harder to find in the Bay Area.
Proposition E would basically tie the amount of office space that can be built in San Francisco to how well the city does on meeting its affordable housing goals.
A vote on Proposition E is expected in March, and Bloomberg's Noah Buhire says some say the measure is igniting a lot of discussion.
The city has just a massive shortage of affordable housing. They create far more jobs than new housing units. So, the question is, if this measure passes and it's pulling quite well, what's the impact going to be?
Green Street Advisors says strengthening existing restrictions on office projects could drive San Francisco's sky-high commercial rents even higher and end up pushing more companies to other Bay Area cities instead. The payments company Stripe, among those that have recently fled San Francisco for South San Francisco. And that's your Bloomberg Real Estate Report. I'm Denise Pellegrini.
Rich is just a really, really, really good guy. The term good egg isn't enough to describe him. He's also certified organic and free range. Rich puts the cap back on everything. The toothpaste, the olive oil, the shampoo, everything. He lets his 10-year-old nephew beat him at virtual tennis, even though he can straight up slay his 10-year-old nephew in virtual tennis. When the toilet paper is running low, Rich replaces the roll on the actual holder, not just on the back of the toilet. Rich is texting and driving. Rich? No. What are you doing, Rich? I was just telling everyone how great you are. Texting and driving makes good people look bad. Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Connecting decision makers to a network.
Let's get this right, sir. You didn't see three men dressed as clowns take off in a van with a Renaissance painting because you were distracted by, and I quote, a sporty red compact SUV with a bold mesh grille, a sculpted bonnet with sweeping roofline on diamond-cut alloys.
And beautiful rear haunches.
So, you saw a Jaguar E-Pace. But what about the clowns?
What clowns?
Jaguar E-Pace, designed to steal attention. Search Jaguar E-Pace.
I used to be a bit of a rubbish sleeper. I'd toss and turn all night, and somehow I could never find the comfy bit of the mattress. It was a proper nightmare. That's what brought me here, testing mattresses in the Which Test Lab. We use a custom-made barrel rolling machine to simulate a decade's worth of use. And the mattresses that perform best are the only ones we recommend for your bedroom.
Which tests harder so you can buy smarter. Visit which.co.uk.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
A lot of people aren't aware that TuneIn lets you listen to the same terrestrial stations that you pick up on your FM AM dial, except you can hear them from anywhere. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
Coast and worldwide, the meetings of the World Economic Forum in Davos. I'm Tom Keene. John Farrell with me as well. And, of course, part of Davos, John, for Bloomberg Television. And we're going to do this for Bloomberg Radio. Shake my hand. There's like a normal shake of a hand, okay. Bloomberg Radio. And then there's the Davos shake of the hand, which you have to be very earnest, like, how are you?
Shaking.
Have you been well?
I'm literally shaking.
Have you been well?
What are we doing?
We're doing the Davos handshake for Bloomberg Radio
is that
worldwide.
What you said to people? Oh,
that's
it's been
what you,
so long.
You do this as well.
It's there's a reason for that.
And the reason they're doing that is because they don't want to read Scott Meyer to Guggenheim. Is what it is. Was that a good Seguin?
That note that we started the week with
was not a "Have you been doing well?" note. No, it wasn't.
I think that was Guggenheim lashing out a little bit. Scott Meyer did good at Guggenheim with some strong words to say about investor behavior and whether this market right here is a Ponzi scheme. Take a listen.
If you take the history of the United States since the late 70s, I would call monetary policy a policy of bubble to bubble. For instance, to save the economy after the stock market crash, right? The Fed cut rates and overinflated commercial real estate, and then we had to bail out the banks with the Resolution Trust Corporation. So then once things calmed down again, investors no longer thought that commercial real estate was safe, and they inflated the internet bubble to the wealth effect to keep the economy going. And then, of course, it went bust, and so then people didn't feel safe in stocks, so they started buying homes. And we played that out, and it bust. And so my attitude is when you look at the amount of leverage in corporate America and where we are today, you definitely are inflating a bubble here in credit.
Well, let's talk about the quote that you sent out to clients. A long note. I've read it. Here's a quote from it. The timing is hard to predict, but it reminds me a lot of the lead up to 2001 and 2002. Then you pointed out the term Ponzi scheme, where the only reason investors keep adding to risk is the fear that prices will be higher tomorrow.
Right.
With that in mind, you've made this call. Are you de-risking or are you staying long risk? What are you doing?
I got to tell you something. We started de-risking back in 2018. And I can tell you that I was an investment genius in 2018. But when the Fed pivoted, you had to ask yourself a question. And I'm guided a lot by behavioral finance and the work of Danny Kahneman, who won the Nobel Prize. One of the biggest mistakes asset managers or asset allocators make is they try to do too many tactical trades. And so what Danny would say is, look 5 years into the future, what do you see coming? And don't change what you're doing to try to catch a tactical move. So, and so in 2019, as an investment manager, I looked like an idiot because we've trailed a lot of other people who've basically just said, hey, wave in corporate debt, wave in high yield, let's go for it. And, someday, the music will stop. But
is the elasticity when the music stops something anyone can manage, including smaller investors listening on Bloomberg Radio, watching on Bloomberg TV? Is the elasticity or malleability of the system there so we can respond and react when we get that? Or is it a jump condition where it's going to be ugly?
Well, one of my colleagues at Guggenheim likes to say that asset prices go up on an escalator and they come down.
Well, normal.
And they come down in an elevator, right? So the problem is, since nobody I know is smart enough to figure out when the music stops, I think that's a really difficult thing for people to try to time. And, here, as an example, if 2 days from now or early next week, there's an announcement from the Federal Reserve or in the Fed meeting on Wednesday that they're thinking about tapering the bill purchase program. Remember what happened when we talked about tapering QE in 2013? We didn't even need the act.
That was a taper tantrum, and this is going to be called the Minor tantrum.
Carry on. Is this QE then? James Coleman, Morgan Stanley, sat in your seat, said exactly the same thing.
Yeah,
many people disagree with you, though.
Well, I mean, I got to tell you something. When I talk to people at the Fed and other believers that don't think this is QE, they say, oh, well, the Fed isn't buying longer-term duration assets to affect the shape of the term structure of interest rates. And my response to that is, look, I think the official name of QE is large-scale asset purchases.
That was Scott Minor of Guggenheim. Open, honest, very transparent. Not only is he scathing about where this market is, Tom, he's also admitting, look, I missed the rip through last year. I de-risked in 2018.
Boy, does that have a feel of Nouriel Roubini in a different way, 2005, 2006. And I'm going to say that we make jokes about it, but there's a great respect for thinking and considering Mr. Minor's position, even if you're the most bullish of bull. You got to be studying all these different opinions. Frankly, that's how he built Bloomberg surveillance, but that was an important, and wouldn't you agree, narrow view at this Davos?
It's one extreme. You'll always find someone on the other extreme, and we have a conversation. It's a lot to discuss. An important story that developed in the last 24 hours here in Davos, Switzerland. Goldman Sachs' David Solomon, his latest ultimatum. He will no longer take a company public if the board lacks diversity. Joining us now, Sri Nasarajan, Bloomberg banking reporter. Sri, it's great to catch up with you. Let's talk about it. Goldman Sachs, their bankers, are going to tell any company that wants to go public and do an IPO with them, show me a board. If there's no diversity, we won't do business.
And that's why we asked the question this morning, is this the death of the all-white men board? This is a small step, but it is a big deal. More companies go public with Goldman than most any other bank out there. And the numbers behind this are staggering. Goldman did some research and they say in the last couple of years in US and Europe, 60 companies have gone public without a single female board member.
Wow.
Another 100 companies with just one female board member. So what are they going to do starting July? If you do not have a woman or a person of color on your board, they're not taking you public. And in 2021, they're going to up it to 2 people.
So, Sri, here's the challenge. Okay, Goldman, you don't want my business, I'm going to Morgan Stanley. Doesn't everyone else now have to turn around and say, Goldman Sachs just set the new standard, we can't accept your business either?
All right, so it's absolutely your move, JP Morgan, your move, Morgan Stanley. But look, Goldman's not really known to be a first mover in most cases, especially on issues like this. You have firms like BlackRock and State Street who've gone out there and said, look, we'll vote against your directors if you don't have a woman on your board. And you have California, the homeland of tech IPOs, that said, we will fine the company if you do not have a diverse board. So Goldman's following those cues, but it is still an important step because they're the first big investment bank to do it.
It's an important step, but it's almost insulting. First of all, how many people are typically on a board?
Anywhere between 5 to 10?
5 to 10. So we're looking, when the key word here is a word that was negative, token. We're saying a token woman is good enough?
But you have to look at the stats behind it. Goldman cannot make all the change here. The unfortunate part is this has to be done by diktat, right? We would much rather that this happens organically when folks start up the company in a garage and grow up.
What's the pushback on this? If you've written this story over the last 48 hours, what's the pushback from people that are saying that was a mistake to make this decision, Goldman Sachs?
Not necessarily a mistake for Goldman Sachs, but why now? What happened with WeWork? Who were the banks on WeWork? Goldman was one of the banks. When the S1 came out and people
Was there a woman on the board of WeWork?
There was no woman on the board. Then minutes before the IPO, they decided to add a woman to the board. Well, I say minutes before the IPO never happened, but that was that. So that's why you have some pushback. Is it genuine?
Okay. Sri, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. Sri Natarajan there on Goldman Sachs. This is Bloomberg. Good morning.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, keep me out the cold jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, East London jobs, West London jobs, extra hour in bed jobs, startup jobs, late start jobs, get home in the daylight jobs, banking jobs, building jobs, flexible working on a Friday jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
This is not a cat. This is not a rocket. And this is not a sale. That's right. At Smarty Mobile, we're not having a sale. While others are slashing prices, we're introducing our best ever new plans. Take our new 30 gig data SIM for just £10 a month. With unlimited calls and texts and no speed restrictions, credit checks or contract tying you down, why shop around? New plans, great value. Now that's Smarty. Grab yours today. Search Smarty Mobile. See smarty.co.uk for terms.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
We've all had the odd great idea, like careering down that black run when you've never even worn a pair of skis before, or that legendary Christmas when you tried to cook a turkey in the microwave. Well, how about trying something new? Like treating yourself to a brand new Seat from our best ever range. Because when you request a test drive before the 31st of January, you'll get a whopping £1,000 off the perfect model for you. Now that's got to be a great idea. Just visit seat.co.uk to request your test drive.
Request a test drive online and receive downloadable voucher. Orders until 31st of January. Registered from 1st of January 2020. UK 18 plus. Excludes Me Electric and Taraka 0% offer. Retail sales of new cars at participating dealers only. Cannot be used with any other voucher. T's and C's apply.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Go courtside with the NBA on TuneIn. With the NBA on TuneIn, hear your favorite team and players take on their biggest rivals during the biggest games throughout the year, including regular season showdowns, the 2020 All-Star Game, and the NBA Finals in June, featuring the home and away calls for all 30 teams. Plus, with the NBA on demand, relive the best moments of the season by listening to the past games in their entirety. Listen to the NBA all season long on TuneIn.
Along the goal line, Martin scores! He takes it home!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores!
And you can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium.
Gonna move, hit a shot, he scores!
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
Want to know a quick, easy way to see if your favorite podcasts have a new episode available? Just go to the home screen on your TuneIn app and see the latest editions under the Your New Episode section. Happy listening.
About the losers in a trade war.
You benefit if you're just further away from China.
So that you can too.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Economics.
American economic power and future depends on trade deals.
In many of these countries, we're still seeing people struggling.
Finance.
We're in this vortex of uncertainty. These big companies, they just sometimes lack focus.
Investment.
The markets have become a little bit too addicted to the Fed.
Timing the market is just so difficult.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good Friday morning from New York City to our worldwide audience. Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney coming to you from our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. Equity futures point to a higher open as investors set aside for now concerns over a deadly virus spreading from China. The Senate impeachment continues and the World Economic Forum in Davos wraps up. We'll bring you the latest news throughout the morning. Right now, let's get the latest action in the pre-market with Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson. Dave, what are you looking at right now?
Got to start with Intel. It's the most active stock in early trading, and it's up about 5%. The chip maker's fourth quarter earnings and revenue were higher than analyst average estimates in a Bloomberg survey. Intel's forecast for this year also beat projections thanks to surging demand for chips used in cloud computing equipment. You've got another chip maker, Broadcom, up 3%. The company disclosed 2 supply agreements with Apple that may generate as much as $15 billion in revenue.
Okay, wait, before you go on, is there any kind of bigger point that we can extrapolate out that basically they're feeling better because the trade tensions are sort of put on hold?
Well,
Not really.
I mean, it's more like the data center business is growing. I mean, that's really what's helping them. Everybody's kind of going to the cloud, and that's a trend that's going on regardless of what's happening on the trade front.
All right,
really.
Carry on. Sorry.
All right, Broadcom, they got these two deals, and they run through 2023. Now, Broadcom's chips enable iPhones, iPads, and Apple Watches to connect to wireless networks. And actually, Wall Street Journal reported back in December that this business is up for sale, and two potential bidders, according to people familiar with the matter, are lower in today's trading. One of them is Corvo, down 1.5%. The other is Skyworks Solutions, down 0.5%, even though the company came out with quarterly results that beat estimates. So,
interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of back and forth here. Walt Disney's down 0.5%. The Disneyland theme park in Shanghai and other attractions in the city will close temporarily in response to that Chinese outbreak of coronavirus. The shutdown will begin tomorrow. And talk about, back and forth. You've definitely got that going on in the credit card business. American Express is up 2%. That company's profit and sales projections for this year surpassed estimates. And Amex's fourth quarter results showed credit card reward costs rose less than expected. On the other hand, Discover Financial down 7.5%. Earnings at the card company barely beat the average estimate, even though it set aside less money for loan losses than analysts expected. And it's a similar story at Synchrony Financial, which issues core cards for other companies. Synchrony shares down 5% in early trading. You have E-Trade Financial down 2.5%. Discount brokers' fourth quarter earnings coming up short of projections. Of course, that industry really roiled by commission-free trading on U.S. stocks and exchange-traded funds that Charles Schwab kind of led the way on just a few short months ago. Intuitive Surgical down 1.5%. Fourth quarter sales growth at the maker of robotic surgery systems slowed in advance of competition from Medtronic and Johnson & Johnson. And Bloomberg Intelligence wrote that the outlook overshadowed results that beat estimates. And one more for you, Atlassian. This is a business software maker. It's up 8%. The company posted fiscal second quarter earnings and revenue beat estimates and raised full year projections.
Dave Wilson, Bloomberg Stocks editor, thank you. Really interesting stories today under the surface, especially with the chip makers, which have often been used as sort of a bellwether of global economic growth. Right now, let's shift to Washington, D.C. and the view there, especially in light of the impeachment. We're always lucky at this time to have the Face the Nation host, Margaret Brennan, joining us now. Face the Nation on CBS and also airing on Bloomberg Radio this Sunday. Margaret, so much to talk about. We've got the dueling narratives of the impeachment trial and then President Trump's victory lap on the economy, which certainly was in focus at Davos. With the impeachment, what is the prevailing narrative after the first week of testimony?
Well, we will hear from the president's lawyers on Saturday start their narrative, which is, as we know, what the president argues is that this is all about politics and that there was nothing wrong here. Privately, Republicans aren't so comfortable with that phone call that this kicked off on July 25th with Ukraine's leader, but they will focus on the process. They will try to move through this quickly. What we've heard in these few days of testimony by the prosecution, House impeachment managers, is retelling the story of the more than dozen U.S. officials who took an oath and said to Congress in the House that they felt that there was an understanding the president wanted an investigation into Ukraine for his own political purposes and not having to do with corruption writ large. So that is the narrative through graphics and sound bites that Democrats have laid out. And now we will begin to hear from the White House.
Margaret, what's the expectation here about, I guess, one of the unknowns in this impeachment process is whether witnesses will be called, documents will be introduced. What's the feeling at this point of how that might proceed?
Well, the audience that Democrats have focused on is 4 Republican senators. That's who they would need to persuade to vote to get the 51 to approve witnesses and documents. At this point, Democrats are quietly saying they don't think they have them. And so this would mean that without that introduction, they would speed through to a wrap-up of the trial by next week.
Is this a victory for the Republicans?
Well, certainly for the president, he was going to declare victory either way because we knew the outcome was so unlikely to actually see the removal of the president. For Mitch McConnell, it is a victory that he looks like, at least at this point, and things could change, but it looks like he has held his caucus in line. So it would be a victory for him to also stick to that speedy timeline that the president asked him to deliver on.
Margaret, what do you think the Democrats ideally would like to take away from this entire proceeding here?
Well, what you've heard from Chairman Schiff in his sort of passionate closing argument yesterday was that it was really kind of a question of, are we as a country okay with this behavior? Because he's saying that is essentially the precedent being set. Are we okay with the president using his office for these political means, as Democrats argue, that it is, a sublimation of national security interests for personal ones? Is that the new benchmark? Is that what we are doing? That is what the premise of this is about for Democrats. They also argue that this is about election security, that there has been a marker laid down that it appears, now that these back channels being spun through Rudy Giuliani and others have now been cut off, at least in the case of Ukraine. That is what Democrats have argued, because going into this election, they want the president's behavior to be called into question rather than just focusing on the party itself. And this is something that, in this incredibly partisan environment, getting people to think outside party lines is a real challenge these days.
Margaret, you're in an amazing position right now to hear both the sort of back channel discussions of both Republicans and Democrats about impeachment and also about national security concerns. But you also have a view on what the narrative is that they're trying to put out there and sort of the sort of strategy there. I'm trying to get your sense of whether under the surface there's a shift at all in focus toward what we learned about potential Saudi Arabian hacking of the phone of Jeff Bezos and the connection with Jamal Khashoggi, because when I speak with national security officials, they're a little bit more concerned about that right now.
Concerned
about just sort of the potential for the Saudi Arabian government to be able to have access possibly to other people, or sort of what the potential ramification could be for Saudi Arabia, given the fact that it does seem like there's independent verification of the fact that they hacked into a major U.S. executive's phone. Any of that on the radar of the people who you're talking to, or not really?
Certainly people who have been skeptics and critics of Saudi Arabia. You've seen Ron Wyden, the senator, and others try to get more information regarding Saudi behavior and dancing around U.S. law enforcement on a few different fronts. So you have heard alarm bells being rung on that. And actually, it's one of the few bipartisan things right now to truly question some of the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia's behavior. Even Lindsey Graham, who is obviously a very staunch ally of the president, has split with him on his unquestioning support for the Crown Prince because of a number of things, not just the war in Yemen, not just phone hacking, not just the death of Jamal Khashoggi. So there is real concern from Saudi officials that this relationship is fraying. It is still very tightly wound on the intelligence front, and that is really what kind of underpins the relationship in the first place.
Margaret, what do you have for us on Face the Nation Sunday?
We've Tom Cotton, a Republican senator from Arkansas, staunch defender of the president, who is one of those jurors and members of the court listening to testimony. He's also raising concerns about the spread of this coronavirus in China. He's written a public letter to Health and Human Services. He's raising red flags, asking for more information to be shared with Congress about a potential risk here. And he's accusing the Chinese government of not being forthcoming. We'll talk to him about that. We'll also speak to Jason Crow, one of the Democrats in the House who's acting as the prosecution, House impeachment manager. You'll see him on the floor today.
Margaret Brennan, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate that. Margaret Brennan, host of Face the Nation on the CBS television network Sunday morning. You can hear Margaret Brennan this weekend on Bloomberg Radio, of course. Listen to Face the Nation Sunday at 2 p.m. in New York, Washington, D.C., and Bloomberg 106.1 Boston Newburyport. That's Face the Nation this Sunday at 2 on Bloomberg. Right now, let's get world and national headlines with Michael Barr. Michael, what do you have?
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you, Lisa. Police in southwestern Germany say several people have been injured and some were likely killed in a shooting. A suspect has been arrested. Authorities said the shooting took place shortly after midday in the town of Rothemsee, about 105 miles northwest of Munich. An explosion at a northwest Houston manufacturing business shook part of the city early this morning, sending at least one person to a hospital and damaged nearby homes. At least one person is unaccounted for. Houston Police Chief Art Acevedo.
If you're not in this area, you don't need to be in this area. Stay away from this area. There's nothing to see. You will not be able to get anywhere near where this explosion occurred. So please avoid the area. And you can expect those closures to be going on for the rest of this day, if not into tomorrow. There'll be limited access.
A fire continues to burn at the site. 2 college students and a Tennessee Tech and others at Texas A&M are being tested for coronavirus strain that has infected more than 800 people worldwide and killed more than 25. At least one of the students is believed to have traveled to China, where the virus originated. The Centers for Disease Control's Director for Respiratory Disease, Dr. Nancy Messonnier, says that while researchers are learning more about the coronavirus, there is no cause for alarm.
The immediate risk to the American public is low. However, this situation is evolving quickly, and I do expect more cases in the United States, as well as human-to-human transmission.
Meanwhile, in China, a travel ban remains in place in Wuhan, along with 9 other nearby cities to try to contain the virus's spread, putting more than 33 million people under quarantine. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Lisa.
Thank you so much, Michael Barr. Right now, we are seeing a lift to markets ahead of the U.S. Open. In particular, some names standing out. Intel shares up more than 5% after reporting better than expected earnings. You're seeing a similar kind of lift of Broadcom, 3.6% ahead of the open. Micron, 1.5%. American Express also performing after delivering better than expected results, up 2.7% ahead of the open here in a little bit more than 15 minutes. Meanwhile, in the bond market, interesting those comments by Christine Lagarde saying anyone who thinks that we are permanently on hold is mistaken. You are seeing buying in bonds too, with yields lower as people assess the possibility not only of QE forever, but perhaps more stimulus. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Elite advisory firms rely on BNY Mellon's Pershing to meet the needs of their most complex clients. Karen Novak, Chief Operating Officer at Pershing Advisor Solutions, explains how.
At BNY Mellon's Pershing, we bring customized insights and strategies to help you grow your advisory business and stay on the leading edge. We can support the needs of your most sophisticated clients with a full range of investment and wealth management solutions, from access to private banking to consolidated bank and brokerage custody. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength and high-touch service that BNY Mellon's Pershing can provide. Are you well positioned to stand out from your competition?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Brokerage custody provided by Pershing LLC and other services provided by Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC. Both members of FINRA and SIPC. Private banking and bank custody provided by BNY Mellon NA. Member FDIC.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Take the helm and ignite your spirit of adventure with a Sunsail holiday. Relax on a skippered yacht from sunny St. Lucia to the nutmeg-scented shores of Grenada, or take charge with a bareboat charter along Dubrovnik's glittering coastline. With up to 20% off selected destinations, now is the time to book your Sunsail adventure. Sunsail. See the world differently.
Welcome to Nuffield Health Battersea, a gym built around you. You get regular health MOTs to create a plan that works for you, with physios and personal trainers on site. You'll find a wide range of equipment and classes, and our expert team will support you to get the most out of your health, fitness, and your membership. Join today to get the rest of the month free. Search Nuffield Health. Specialists in you. 12-month commitments only. Facilities stated are in most gyms. Visit nuffieldhealth.com/terms.
Today's $1.99 wrap of the day is the new fajita chicken one. Guaranteed to cause flavour envy. Picture a soft tortilla wrap filled with...
Ooh, pepper jack cheese.
And check out those jalapenos. Bet that Mexican salsa tastes amazing. Today's new $1.99 fajita chicken one. So big on flavour, everyone will want some. Only at McDonald's. From 11 a.m.
Breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. futures are higher while stocks jump in Europe as investors digest the latest corporate news and economic data, setting aside for now fears over that deadly virus spreading from China. Oil falling for a fourth day. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are up 7 points this morning. Dow futures up 88. NASDAQ futures up 29. The DAX in Germany is up 1.6%. 10-year Treasury up 3/30 seconds, yield 1.72%, and the yield on the 2-year 1.51%. NYMEX crude oil is down 1.7% or 92 cents at $54.67 a barrel. And COMEX gold is down 0.4% or $5.90 at $15.65.70 an ounce. The euro 1.1035 against the dollar. The British pound 1.3102. And the yen is at 109.54. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Lisa. Thank you so much, Karen. Meanwhile, Davos is wrapping up its week of festivities and discussions about climate change, about diversity among corporations, as well as a host of other issues. Francine Lacroix has been there driving the narrative, Bloomberg surveillance anchor from Davos, Switzerland. A number of really great interviews. Francine joining us now. We're very lucky to have her. Francine, you must be exhausted. Can you give us a sense of what the main takeaway is from a week of discussions among a number of the people who, frankly, lead corporate America as well as the central banking policies of the world?
Well, Lisa, the overarching theme was definitely on sustainability. The overarching theme is that each sector needs to do a little bit more on sustainability. But I would point to a couple of interviews that we've done that really, for me, changed the way I looked at sustainability. We had one minister that came on to say, look, we need to make sure, first of all, that this drive for more sustainability doesn't go out the window if we have a lot more focus on recessionary risks. The other one was saying, look, it's not because you focus on sustainability that you have to leave diversity. And then I also, at least, had a great conversation with Madame Lagarde, Christine Lagarde, the ECB president. Now, we touched on climate change, on central banks, and she really at some point warned investors in our conversation not to assume that this current monetary policy is locked in for the foreseeable future just because officials are focused on reviewing their strategy. Here she is.
To those who think that it's autopilot, I think that's ridiculous. There is a forward guidance which is strong, which is setting, a very clear timetable that is fact dependent. But let's look at the facts. Let's look at how the economy evolves. That's what we do. We need to be fact driven. We need to be clear in our communication, and we will be. And I'm saying today, don't assume that it will be on autopilot.
Yesterday you talked quite extensively about negative rates. You said tiering is working well, but is there a point where actually the side effects of negative rates means that you need to scale it back?
We will be looking at the side effects as part of the strategy review. There's no question about that. We need to be attentive to that. Financial stability is not our first driver of concern and consideration, but we will have to look at it, of course. Yeah. And don't forget that we need to have a banking sector in the euro area that acts as a good channel of transmission.
So, Francine, Interesting comments coming out of from Christine Lagarde. Do you get a sense that the central bank will be on the sidelines, just kind of focusing on the data before she acts?
Yes, this was, it was an interesting interview, one of many, but she was interesting because it was a day after she announced that they were going to go through this massive ECB review, so that they were looking at the inflation goal and tools. That they haven't done that since 2003. So this process won't conclude until around December. And so she was basically saying that, I know there are a few analysts that see much change in policy because the euro area economy is stabilizing and the stimulus package is still in place. But she says, watch out. It was almost a wake-up call for markets not to drop the ball on the ECB.
Well, a wake-up call in which direction, right? I mean, the way that I interpreted it, quite honestly, was, hey, we could cut rates even going forward, because no one's talking about rate hikes at this point, given the tepid inflation and the still meager growth in Europe.
Yeah, a rate cut is probably, it depends on what the economy does, right? But she was saying that there are less risks now to the economy than there were a couple of months ago. We still have the threats of tariffs. President Trump left Davos a couple of days ago saying, look, he's still looking at German car makers and whether he wants to tax them if they go into the country. So, yes, a cut would be the way that people would perceive it. But if you think about negative rates, you kind of wonder whether the ECB would really dare go into deeper negative territory and what that would mean for their banks. So, yes, it could be to the downside, but I think she was also overall just talking about extra stimulus or extra tools that maybe would be more unconventional than just interest rates.
So, Francine, you mentioned that obviously one of the key topics during the week has been sustainability, governance. We've heard that from corporate executives, politicians, regulators. Is there any reason to believe that, but we've certainly heard that in prior years as well, is there any reason to believe that this year might be different, that it might be something more than just rhetoric?
In part, Paul, I'd like to think so. A lot of people say that there's a turning point because people talk about it, because people have set goals. They want to cut their emissions. A lot of companies have pledged. But I think you need to wait 12 months to really see whether they'll get on with it, right? So, what is Davos? Davos is basically where the rich and powerful come to talk about how they solve issues. The economy was in focus today. A lot of the talk on climate change was in the last couple of days. And what people are worried about is that we talk and around the edges they do some things, but actually they get sidetracked if something, goes bad with profits if you're a corporate or if there's a recession coming. So I think it's progress, but let's see really what they can do in the next 12 months. And we've spoken to a couple of agencies that will try and monitor some of the progress.
Francine Lacqua, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate all the work you and the Bloomberg team have done in Davos this week. Lots of fantastic interviews and discussion pushing the conversation forward. Francine Lacqua, Bloomberg surveillance anchor. Final day at Davos, another week of Davos behind us. Lisa, it's interesting that there was, I would say it was clearly a theme there about sustainability, governance, both from, again, the corporate suite to the regulators to politicians. There seems to be, a fairly wide agreement and broad agreement that this is something that needs to be addressed. Again, it's just a question of how much can they really affect going forward?
Well, look, Davos is a time when the rich and powerful get together and they wax philosophical about the big issues of the day. And sometimes they are correct about their warnings about what's going to come to pass in the next year or so. And sometimes they're not. I think the big questions that emerged from this particular meeting certainly did have to do with sustainability. But there was a lot of other news. I think that in particular, Bob Prince of Bridgewater saying the boom and bust cycle is over. What is the role of central banks? And I think that fundamentally, as we enter this year, when very few people expect a recession globally, people expect the economy to continue to accelerate. What does that mean for the longer term? Does that mean we're not setting up for a bust, or does that mean that we're fooling ourselves and that people are getting complacent and there's sort of that anxiety hanging over the market? And certainly was reflected by dueling comments from the likes of Bob Prince as well as from the Oppenheimer Scott Meinert.
Exactly. We're looking at futures here, green on the screen to end up the week. We have the S&P up 6. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute.
The Norwegian sale is now on. Fly to Europe from £29.90, North America from £134.90, or South America from £189.90. And with low fares to over 150 other destinations, the world has never been closer. Start your journey at norwegian.com. All fares are one way from London Gatwick. Baggage fees apply. Travel periods vary by route. Visit our website for more details. Sale ends Monday.
At Ring, we've reinvented the doorbell. So no matter where you are, or what time of day, you can watch over your home and the things you care about. Ring Video Doorbell streams HD video and two-way talk straight to your phone, so you can speak to whoever's at your door from anywhere.
Delivery.
Oh, great. Could you leave it with my neighbour, please?
Sure, no problem.
And it's so simple, you can install it yourself in minutes. See, hear and speak to whoever's at your door from wherever you are with Ring Video Doorbell. Available at ring.com and selected retailers.
Here at Tesco, we're celebrating over 100 years of great value with even more great prices that take you back. Like a 6-pack of Mr. Kipling Angel Slices, now half price, from £1.80 to just 90p. All this week at Tesco.
Selected larger stores subject to availability. Offer ends 27th of January.
Had the same job for the last 15 years? Working with the same people, in the same office, drinking tea from the same comedy mug, eating the same crayfish and rocket sandwich every lunchtime, using the same business jargon, and climbing the same greasy pole. What does that even mean? Then maybe it's time to switch it up, starting with the all-new Vauxhall Corsa. With its bold styling and up to 70 miles per gallon. To switch it up, visit your local Vauxhall dealership or search New Corsa. Official WLTP test figures for comparison purposes only. Real-world figures may vary.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 1061 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
And good morning, I'm Karen Moscow, along with Paul Sweeney and Lisa Abramowitz. And the opening bell is brought to you by SEI. Asset managers don't get results that are off the charts when their solutions are off the shelf. Learn how SEI's operating platform can turn infrastructure into a competitive advantage at SEIC.com/IMS.
The S&P 500 higher at the open, up 0.2% or 6 points at 3332. The Dow Jones Industrial Average up 0.33% or 103 points to 29,266. And the Nasdaq's up 0.5% or 42 points at 9445. 10-year Treasury up 4/32, yield 1.71%. Yield on the 2-year 1.51%. NYMEX crude oil's down 1.7% or 95 cents at 54.65 a barrel. COMEX gold down 0.33% or $5.20 at 15.6640 an ounce. The euro 1.1034 against the dollar. The yen is at 109.54. Lisa and Paul. Karen, thank you so much for that. Right now, we are seeing a lift to markets, and one of the reasons why some people have given, and perhaps this is just the narrative of the day, is that people do feel like the coronavirus has been somewhat contained. The issue, there are a lot of issues here, potentially, for markets, in particular the fact that the antiviral solution by China of quarantining 40 million people has not been necessarily proven, but there also is a question about the coronavirus itself and how potentially lethal it could evolve to be. Joining us now, Drew Armstrong, in our Interactive Brokers studios. He is the Bloomberg team leader for U.S. healthcare. Drew, what's the latest on the actual strain of coronavirus? This is really key to understanding its impact both on human lives as well as on the market.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we are still watching global health experts try to get a grip on is exactly how contagious this is. We've seen some early estimates of that, and also how potentially dangerous it is. Most of the victims here have been older, which is pretty typical when you see respiratory viruses. You know, the flu infects hundreds of thousands of people, around the U.S. every year, and you see deaths. But a lot of the times, those are, it tends to be folks who are more vulnerable, older people, younger people, and those are the people you really have to worry about. And so we don't yet know exactly where this virus is playing out in that. It does seem like most of those deaths are in an older population. There was a report that there was a patient as young as 36, I believe, in China overnight. And I think we're still watching to see the spread of this. It does appear to have a long incubation time, meaning there's going to be a lag in identifying some of these cases. And the other problem is that a lot of the symptoms look like a cold or a flu. So you might have milder cases out there that just never get reported or identified, and it makes it a little bit tougher for people to make a perfect estimate of how strong this virus actually is.
Drew, what's been the response of the World Health Organization?
Well, I mean, yesterday they finished up this 2-day meeting where they were making a decision on whether or not to declare what's called a public health emergency of international concern. Now, that sounds, like a big giant flashing siren. It can mean a lot of different things. It's essentially an estimate of, is this a international emergency that needs an international response? Right now, their assessment is that this is a China situation. We do have cases around the world. We haven't anybody die outside China yet. We haven't seen secondary transmission, which means someone who was in China came back to their home country and infected someone there, which essentially says, okay, we now have a population of people infecting other folks, kind of a live virus working its way through a population in a new location. And so they're treating this essentially as a country level issue for now. They've said they are very concerned about it. They are watching it closely, but we don't yet have the kind of giant global coordinated response, even though you're seeing a lot of actions to, screen passengers on flights and watch for symptoms very, very closely at this point.
Why are our officials so much more worried about the coronavirus than, say, the flu?
I think, there's a newness aspect to this. I think anytime you have something that we don't know, you want to keep a very close eye on it.
Is there any precedent for this? I mean, has this ever been seen before, this particular virus?
This strain of this is being called a novel coronavirus. It doesn't have a name. Coronaviruses are actually pretty common. They are all over the place. They exist a lot in animals. We find them in bats, in some. I believe there was a paper out saying that there might be some reservoir in snakes, though people are saying that that's probably not the source here. All sorts of viruses exist around the world in these animal reservoirs. You go to any, a cave, a jungle, a park or something like that. You will find viruses that infect animals and don't infect people. Occasionally they do make the leap, which is what appears to be what has happened here. We don't know the exact source yet, which is something epidemiologists and researchers around the world are trying to figure out. But these viruses, they're common. There are lots of them. They're just not lots of them in humans.
It seems to me, at least, just reading the news reports, that China is actually been pretty aggressive here in dealing with this. I mean, restricting the travel of, upwards of 40 million people. It seems to me that the Chinese government is responding, appropriately, aggressively. Is that kind of the feedback in the marketplace?
I think everyone, yes, they are being recognized as responding aggressively. I think what we don't know is what will be the effects of that aggressive response. Putting 40 million people on quarantine and shutting down travel in and out of some of the cities where they live, that is a big deal